Chapter 3461. So, how much of your liking him is real? Liking him at first sight, I don't really understand this kind of feeling. Chu Ho suddenly turned to him and asked, do you know me? Do you know what kind of person I am and what kind of past I have? Do you like that man? Chu Ho shook her head. I don't like him. Li Xiaofeng was a little confused. Then why did you marry him? You said it's for the child. Wouldn't it be too unfair for you to marry a man you don't like for the sake of the child? Is it worth it? Unfair? Chu Ho said bluntly, I gave birth to the child, so I have to bear the responsibility. Everyone has someone they cherish in their heart. For that person, even if it's a mountain of knives or a sea of fire, I have no regrets. Li Xiaofeng, however, was firm in his stance. He didn't know what he was thinking either. He only said, a marriage without feelings will not lead to happiness. Without feelings, feelings can be cultivated. Chu Ho paused for a moment and said, but there's no second chance for a child's childhood. There's no second chance in life either. Li Xiaofeng maintained his stance. A marriage built on sacrificing one's own happiness is not good for the child. Chu Ho suddenly stopped talking. She just turned her head and squinted her eyes to look at him calmly. After a long time, she suddenly asked, don't you have someone you want to protect with everything you have? Li Xiaofeng was stunned and couldn't reply for a long time. No. That's a pity. Chu Ho said so and didn't say anything else. People who walked different paths could not make plans together. Li Xiaofeng was different from her. Xiao Bao was her most important family member. Li Xiaofeng lived in the peaceful era. He might have grown up without worrying about food or clothing, successfully completed his university studies, and then graduated with a stable job. But she was different. She was born in a war-torn country. Starvation, war, homeless, and homeless. She was practically fleeing to a foreign country. In order to survive, she struggled at death's door. Just to stay alive, she had exhausted almost all of her strength. Not to mention living with dignity. He used to be a mercenary and later joined the Interpol. Any child from a normal family would not be willing to serve in a mercenary group for so long. All of this was for survival. And Xiao Bao was the family that God had bestowed upon her after she had survived a calamity. She had no choice, but she was grateful that Xiao Bao had chosen her and become her child. When he was young, without a father, Xiao Bao was ostracized and humiliated by many children his age. She knew all of this, but she couldn't get involved with the children. She could only protect Xiao Bao as much as she could. Now, Xiao Bao had a father and acknowledged him as his father. In the beginning, it wasn't that she didn't reject Gu Jinglian, but the result of her rejection was that it made Xiao Bao sad. She did not want him to be sad. Moreover, there was nothing wrong with marrying Gu Jinglian. Marriage didn't mean that they had to treat each other with respect like other couples. They could still live their own lives. When needed, they just had to play their roles well. She didn't know if she was doing the right thing, but this was what Xiao Bao wanted. To her, it was the right thing to do. Chapter 3462. Li Xiaofeng didn't say anything after hearing that. He just lowered his head awkwardly, not knowing what to think. The two of them didn't talk during the whole journey. When they arrived at Li Xiaofeng's apartment, the chauffeur said, we're here. Chu Ho said, don't settle the bill yet. Li Xiaofeng saw that they were already at the door. He slowly sat up and fumbled for his wallet to give her the money. Chu Ho said, it's okay, I'll settle the bill myself. You sent me back, so I should give you the money. It's okay. Chu Ho said, just take it as a bonus for my absence tomorrow. Li Xiaofeng sighed and opened the door to get out of the car. He suddenly realized that he seemed to have said something he shouldn't have. He turned around and said to her guiltily, I'm sorry, Chu Ho, I seem to have lost my composure today. Chu Ho smiled at him. It's okay, just that I don't want you to judge someone when you don't know them. After that, she closed the car door and instructed the chauffeur, let's go. Please send me to Chui Fu Avenue. Just as the car was about to leave, Li Xiaofeng impulsively grabbed the car window and mustered up his courage. Chu Ho, can't you consider me? Chu Ho turned around in surprise. Li Xiaofeng said sincerely, I've thought it through on the way here. Whether you have a child or not, I like you. Liking someone is something that can't be changed easily. If you're willing, I can be a good husband. A good father. Chu Ho looked at him expressionlessly. Then, she said calmly, I'm sorry, I'm not willing. Li Xiaofeng didn't expect her to be so straightforward and reject him without any hesitation. He was a little embarrassed. He smiled weakly and let go of her hand. The car sped off. Just as the car left, his phone rang. Li Xiaofeng picked up the phone and a man's voice sounded from the other end. Captain, how's the progress? Yeah. Did you and Chu Ho get closer? We specially asked Chu Ho to send you back. Did you seize the opportunity? Li Xiaofeng was speechless. What progress? There was no progress. In the future, don't come up with any stupid ideas. With that, she hung up the phone angrily. Li Xiaofeng held his throbbing forehead as he thought about how he had lost his composure tonight. He didn't know how to face Chu Ho tomorrow. On the way, Chu Ho's phone rang. It was Gu Jinglian's number. She picked up the phone and Gu Jinglian's cold voice came from the other end. Why aren't you back yet? He's on his way. Why are you so late? Chu Ho replied, a colleague was drunk, so I sent him home. Send a colleague home? Gu Jinglian was stunned. For some reason, he felt a little uncomfortable. A man or a woman? Chu Ho did not expect him to ask such a question. It was as if he cared a lot about it. Puzzled, she asked, is it important whether it's a man or a woman? Gu Jinglian, it's a man. Chu Ho replied and then asked, is Xiao Bao asleep? Beep, 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 Chu Ho, the person on the other end hung up the phone. She could tell that she had pissed him off. How did she offend him again for no reason? Chu Ho stared speechlessly at the phone that had been hung up and muttered, why are you throwing a tantrum again? Chapter 3463. After Chu Ho returned to the Gu residence, she walked to the main entrance and realized that the door was locked. Why was the door locked? Normally, the Gu residence's main entrance would still be open even when it was very late. Moreover, it was guarded by the Gu family's guards day and night. Now that the door was suddenly locked, Chu Ho was puzzled and knocked on the door. No one opened the door for a long time. She was a little impatient and kicked the door hard. With a loud bang, the door made a loud sound. Then, footsteps could be heard from the other side of the door. Chu Ho crossed her arms and waited for someone to open the door. However, when the person reached the door, he said through the door, is it Sister Chu? All the Gu family's subordinates addressed Chu Ho as Sister Chu. It was not because of anything else, but because when Chu Ho stood there, her aura spread imperceptibly and she was extraordinarily dignified. She was once the top anti-mafia inspector of the Interpol. After many years of accumulation, the aura in her bones was incomparable to that of an ordinary person. Chu Ho said, it's me. Open the door. Sorry, I can't open the door for you. The person inside said gloomily. Chu Ho's gaze darkened. Why? The subordinate said fearfully, this is Master's order. What kind of order is this? He left her alone outside in the middle of the night and didn't even open the door. What was the meaning of this? Did he want her to sleep on the streets? Gu Jinglian, Chu Ho was so angry that she gritted her teeth. What was this man up to again? Chu Ho kicked the door impatiently and ordered coldly, open the door. I can't open it. This is Master's order. Before he could finish speaking, Chu Ho took half a step back and kicked the door open with a loud bang. Chu Ho walked in and saw a few of her subordinates staring at her with fear and disbelief. This door was heavily guarded and very sturdy, but she had kicked it open with one kick. How valiant! Sister Chu, Chu Ho took a step forward and grabbed one of the men by the collar. He shouted angrily, why are you locking the door? Did Gu Jinglian ask you to lock it? It's master's order. He let go of him at once and strode upstairs. She walked through the long corridor of District 9 and walked up the stairs to Gu Jinglian's room. She pushed the door open and saw Gu Jinglian sitting on the sofa in his bathrobe in the study. He was looking at a ledger. She did not know how long he had been sitting there. He had a cold expression on his face and did not even turn his head. His cold voice instantly froze the air in the room. Who let you in? Chu Ho strode up to him and said angrily, Gu Jinglian, what's wrong with you? Gu Jinglian questioned her expressionlessly, why did you come back so late? Chu Ho narrowed her eyes in confusion. She didn't know that he had even set the time for her to return home. I remember that before I left, I said that I would be back a little late. In other words, she had already reported it to him. He didn't have to be calculative with her for even a minute or a second. Gu Jinglian finally looked up and glanced at her coldly. He said word by word, I didn't allow you to come home so late. Chu Ho was even more puzzled. When did you say that? The man's thin lips spat out 2 words. Now. He could have said it earlier. Chapter 34-64. It's the middle of the night. Don't be crazy. Chu Ho said, I'm tired. I'm going back to my room to rest. Just as she turned around, the man's cold voice sounded behind her again. Xiao Bao is in Uncle Fu's room. Chu Ho snorted coldly. Then I'll go back to my room. With that, she left the study without looking back. When Chu Ho returned to her room, she realized that the door was locked. She didn't even have to think to know who was behind this. Chu Ho completely lost her patience. Following her memory, she found the key to her room. Just as she opened the door to her room, she was shocked by the scene in front of her. In the huge room, all the furniture had been removed, leaving only a sofa. The bed was also gone. She had only gone to the gathering for dinner, but the room had been emptied. Uncle Fu woke up in the middle of the night and happened to pass by. He saw Chu Ho standing in the room, staring blankly at the empty furnishings. Chu Ho, you're back. Chu Ho turned around and looked at Uncle Fu. She said indignantly, Uncle Fu, can you explain what's going on? Where's my bed? Uncle Fu came in to take a look and immediately explained, your clothes and bed have been moved to the master bedroom. Master bedroom? Chu Ho widened her eyes. Isn't that Gu Jinglian's room? Yeah. Xiao Bao said that since you and old master are getting married, then the room will have to be moved too. Xiao Bao. Chu Ho gritted her teeth angrily. This rascal actually dared to play this game with her. Forget it. At most, she would sleep on the sofa tonight and think of another way tomorrow. When Chu Ho returned to the master bedroom, she saw that Gu Jinglian was still sitting on the sofa. She walked over and questioned, were you the one who told Xiao Bao that we were getting married? Gu Jinglian suddenly stood up and walked in front of her. He sniffed her gently, and a cold glint appeared in his eyes. You smell like someone else. His face was full of disgust. Gu Jinglian had a serious obsession with cleanliness. He was so obsessed with cleanliness that he could clearly distinguish the smell of everyone. Chu Ho frowned. He raised his arm and sniffed, but he couldn't smell anything. Just because she couldn't smell it didn't mean that Gu Jinglian couldn't. For a woman as slow-witted as her, she was so slow-witted that Li Xiaofeng, in order to give her a perfect impression, had dressed up meticulously before leaving the house. He had even sprayed some men's cologne, but she did not notice it. Gu Jinglian could naturally tell that the fragrance on her body came from men's cologne. How close did she have to be to get that damn smell? Who were you with tonight? He asked again. Chu Ho frowned and said impatiently, why are you so strict about who I'm with? Gu Jinglian was extremely displeased with her tough attitude and forced her into a corner. Speak. The biting cold aura on his body quickly filled the air, pressing down on them. Chu Ho took a deep breath and said calmly, the leader of the anti-mafia team. Did you hug each other? No. Where did he touch you? Chu Ho felt like she was being interrogated like a prisoner. She looked up and said impatiently, "He was drunk and couldn't stand up. I carried him to the car." Carried? Gu Jinglian's face darkened when he heard this. "Go take a shower and throw your clothes away. Wash up before you go to bed." Chapter 34:65. Chu Ho clenched her fists and shouted angrily at his back, "Don't worry, I'll sleep on the sofa tonight. I won't dirty your bed." Gu Jinglian's back paused, but he did not stop walking. "Up to you." With that, the bedroom door slammed shut with a bang. Domineering. Custom made. Chu Ho cursed in her heart. She took her pajamas from the wardrobe and went into the bathroom. Of course, she couldn't bear to throw her clothes away. She didn't have a lot of clothes. Including her pajamas and work uniform, she only had a total of 5 sets of clothes. There was still a long time before her salary was due, so she didn't have the money to buy clothes. Hence, she threw her clothes into the laundry basket and took a quick shower. She applied some shower gel and was done with it. Chu Ho wasn't as obsessed with cleanliness as Gu Jinglian. Hence, she changed into her pajamas and walked out of the bathroom after her shower. She looked at the bedroom door and saw that it was tightly shut. She couldn't be bothered to find out if he was asleep and lay down on the sofa. Her cell phone in her bag rang. It seemed like there was a message. She took out her cell phone and saw that it was a message from Li Xiaofeng. "Chu Ho, I'm sorry. I had too much to drink today, so I lost my composure. I said a lot of things that I shouldn't have. But I still think that you won't be happy if you marry a man who doesn't have any feelings for you. Stay with me. I'll definitely give you happiness. It doesn't matter if you have a child. I won't care about your past. I can be a good husband and a good father. I just hope that you'll give me a chance. Chu Ho, can't you consider me? I'm serious. All these years, I've never had feelings for any other girl. You gave me a very special feeling the first time I saw you. You're brave and tenacious, but my heart aches for you. Girls are born to be loved by men. You don't have to be so strong. I'll protect you. Are you willing?" This man was really haunting her. Chu Ho frowned and was about to reply, "Sorry, but I'm not willing." However, as soon as she typed the word hug, she felt sleepy and couldn't open her eyes anymore. She actually fell asleep with her phone in her hand. Just as he fell asleep, his hand loosened, and the phone fell to the ground. The screen slowly turned off. Early in the morning, the first ray of sunlight shone in. Gu Jinglian's biological clock was very punctual. When the sunlight fell on his body, he woke up. When he turned around, he found that the bedside was empty. This woman really didn't sleep in the room. He was already very angry when he woke up, and when he thought about how this woman would rather sleep on the sofa than in the room, his anger rose to the maximum. Gu Jinglian got out of bed, opened the door, and walked out. He saw Chu Ho sprawled on the sofa with his long legs propped on the armrest and his other arm resting on his head. Most of the quilt had slid to the ground. Out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly saw the phone that had fallen on the ground. He walked over and picked it up. Because of his touch, the screen automatically lit up. There were more than 10 unread messages on it. He swiped the screen. The phone did not have a password lock, and the first thing he saw was a text message. "Chu Ho? Are you asleep? Are you still not willing to give me this chance? Chu Ho, I really like you. Chu Ho, after I got home, I thought about it for a long time. My feelings for you will never change." Chapter 34:66. He scrolled up and saw the various messages sent by Li Xiaofeng. How did she reply? His fingertips accidentally touched the dialog box, and a word popped up that he hadn't had the time to send. Hug, hug. Hug who? Hug this man? Gu Jinglian was so angry that he clenched his phone tightly. Under his strong grip, there was a crack sound and the screen directly burst into snowflakes. There were a few cracks. The screen of the phone was crushed by his powerful grip. The sudden movement startled Chu Ho. She opened her eyes and felt that she was shrouded in a deep shadow. She blinked and her vision finally regained focus. However, she saw Gu Jinglian's tall figure standing coldly in front of her. He was like a god blocking all the sunlight outside the window. She sat up from the sofa. She was still sleepy and stared at him blankly. "What are you?" Before she could finish her sentence, she saw that he was holding her phone tightly in his hand. Chu Ho wanted to snatch her phone back, but Gu Jinglian casually threw the phone at her. "Gu Jinglian, you, explain." Gu Jinglian was a man of few words, but his face was ashen. His dark face was like a dark cloud hanging over his head. Chu Ho lowered her head to look at the phone screen, but the corner of her eyes suddenly twitched fiercely. Why did the screen crack? Her phone. Just as her fingers touched the phone screen, the screen lit up. After she fell asleep last night, Li Xiaofeng sent her many messages, but she didn't have the time to read them. She didn't have the time to send out the rejection message that she wanted to reply yesterday. Hug, she fell asleep before she could finish this sentence. Therefore, the word hug was especially glaring in Gu Jinglian's eyes. Chu Ho finally understood. Early in the morning, he stood in front of her like a Buddha and inexplicably asked her to explain. Could it be that he wanted to explain these messages and the word hug? She was just about to open her mouth and explain to him, but on second thought, she did not do anything wrong. If she was in a hurry to explain, wouldn't it make it seem like she was hiding something? What's there to explain? In other words, you've already seen it. That's how it is. She didn't say anything. Actually, it was fine. Maintaining her silence was fine. These words undoubtedly added fuel to the fire. When Gu Jinglian heard this, his face darkened even more. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said, "Very good." With that, he turned around and left. Chu Ho muttered, "Ridiculous." Seeing that it was still early, she went back to sleep. Her eyelids had just closed, but before she could fall asleep, she heard the sound of something crashing coming from downstairs. There was the sound of a vase breaking. There was the sound of a cabinet falling to the ground. There was the sound of a chair being kicked away, all kinds of ear-piercing sounds, as well as the terrified screams of the servants, converged into a terrifying symphony. Chu Ho was shocked. He walked out of the door in his slippers and saw Uncle Fu walking toward the stairs with a terrified expression. She and Uncle Fu went downstairs and saw that in just a short 10 minutes, the downstairs was already a mess. Uncle Fu exclaimed, "Ah! This is the enamel passed down from our ancestors during the Qing dynasty." Chu Ho was speechless. Uncle Fu ran downstairs in a panic and picked up the antique enamel that had been mercilessly thrown to the ground by a certain demon king. Fortunately, the floor was covered with an expensive carpet, so it wasn't damaged. He shed tears of relief and gratitude. It's good that it's not damaged. Chapter 3467. Chu Ho stared dumbfounded at Uncle Fu's distressed expression as he hugged the enamel. The corners of his lips twitched violently. He didn't seem surprised that Gu Jinglian had smashed things. Instead, he was more distressed about the priceless antiques that had been smashed to the ground. Did this mean that Gu Jinglian's smashing of things was already normal? Not far away, there was another clattering sound. Uncle Fu anxiously instructed the servants, "What are you all still standing there for? All of you are just standing there like idiots. Hurry up and catch it." "Yes." A group of servants ran towards the living room in a panic. Catch it? Catch what? What did he mean by that? When Chu Ho arrived at the living room, he was shocked to see Gu Jinglian kick over the shelf used to hold the antique vase. A group of people rushed over dauntlessly and caught the vase with their bodies, holding it in their hands in fear. A certain devil had just lifted the vase when rows of servants fell to their knees with a plop. Their hands were wide open, ready to catch it at any moment. Uncle Fu rushed over with the enamel in his arms. He saw the mess at his feet and the porcelain in Gu Jinglian's hands. He turned pale with fright. "Old master. Don't. That was used by Emperor Qianlong during the Ming and Qing dynasties. Before he could finish speaking, Gu Jinglian smashed the vase to the ground. Another group of people rushed over and caught the priceless vase in an extremely pathetic manner. Uncle Fu heaved a sigh of relief and walked over to Gu Jinglian with a long face. "Old master, what's wrong? Why are you throwing a tantrum so early in the morning?" Gu Jinglian didn't even look at him and ignored him. Chu Ho finally couldn't stand it anymore. He walked over, grabbed his sleeve and questioned, "What's wrong with you so early in the morning?" Gu Jinglian flung her hand away in disgust as if her hand was dirty. His face turned ashen at the thought of this hand cuddling with other men. Chu Ho suppressed her anger and looked to the side. Uncle Fu put his palms together and bowed to her like a bodhisattva. It was as if he was asking her to persuade Gu Jinglian. She endured it for a while before she calmly asked, "What exactly do you want?" Gu Jinglian turned around. "Explain." "Explain? Explain what?" Chu Ho furrowed her brows. She finally realized that the text messages on her phone had probably angered this man. "Didn't I tell you? There's nothing to explain." After a pause, she saw that Gu Jinglian's face had darkened even more. She said angrily, "It's not what you think." "Hug." Gu Jinglian spat out a word, his handsome eyes slightly narrowed. "Who are you hugging?" Chu Ho said patiently, "I was too tired when I came back yesterday, so I didn't finish my sentence. I want him back. I'm sorry, I don't want to. In the end, I just typed one word and fell asleep." After she explained, Gu Jinglian's expression softened a little. Seeing that he believed her, she continued, "Looking through other people's phones is an infringement of their privacy. It won't be allowed in the future." Fu Bo's heart skipped a beat as he listened. This Chu Ho actually dared to speak to Old Master like that? Not allowed? Old Master was the only one who could say, "Not allowed," to others. No one had ever dared to say, "Not allowed," to Old Master. Gu Jinglian's face darkened when he heard this. He said, "Who's looking at your phone? If you didn't look through it, then did my phone run into your hands?" Chapter 3468. How infuriating. Chu Ho was going crazy. He had never realized that this guy was so childish. Chu Ho was speechless. "Gu Jinglian, you're not a kid anymore. You're not Xiao Bao's age anymore. Why are you smashing things for no reason?" Just as the tension was about to break out, a childish voice came from the staircase. "What's going on? It's so noisy." Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw Xiao Bao walking down the stairs with a furry toy in his arms and rubbing his sleepy eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw the mess downstairs. He was so shocked that he couldn't stay awake anymore. All the sleepyheads ran away. "Ah!" Xiao Bao followed the mess and saw Chu Ho and Gu Jinglian standing together. Chu Ho looked angry, while Gu Jinglian looked arrogant. He didn't know what was going on and asked fearfully, "What's going on?" Uncle Fu rolled his eyes and immediately said, "It's nothing. Your parents are just playing around." "Playing around?" Xiao Bao was a little confused. "What are they playing?" Chu Ho looked at Uncle Fu speechlessly, waiting to see how he would smooth things over. Uncle Fu's mind flashed and he immediately said, "Oh. They're playing hide and seek." "Hide and seek?" Xiao Bao's eyes lit up and he immediately cheered. "Xiao Bao wants to play hide and seek too." As he said this, he skipped over to Uncle Fu in his slippers and tugged at the corner of his shirt. "Let Xiao Bao play with us. Hide and seek. Hide and seek." Chu Ho was speechless. Uncle Fu was speechless. Gu Jinglian suddenly said, "Change your clothes." He looked at him in bewilderment. "What do you mean?" "Go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get your marriage certificate." Gu Jinglian was a man of few words. With just a few words, he expressed his main idea without any hesitation. Chu Ho was stunned when he heard this. By the time he regained his senses, Gu Jinglian was already heading upstairs. She chased after him and asked in confusion, "Now?" Gu Jinglian said coldly, "Now. Didn't you say in the afternoon?" She had applied for the afternoon leave, but this man had inexplicably chosen to go in the morning. He was simply doing as he pleased. He didn't care about other people's work at all. Gu Jinglian ignored her. Uncle Fu walked up to her and said, "Go to the Civil Affairs Bureau in the morning. There will be fewer people." Chu Ho turned around speechlessly and looked at him. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said, "Is he always so willful?" She was so capricious that she could call the wind and rain whenever she wanted. Uncle Fu pondered for a moment and nodded helplessly. "That's old master's character. Chu Ho, go with old master to get your marriage certificate in the morning. Otherwise, it'll be crowded in the afternoon." Actually, he wanted to say it more to prevent any undue delay. Old master had finally come to his senses and knew that he was going to get married. At this moment, he didn't care who the bride was, as long as it was a woman. Moreover, Chu Ho was Xiao Bao's biological mother. A family reunion was the best. However, he didn't dare to say these words in front of Chu Ho. He didn't want Chu Ho to be unhappy when the time came. Uncle Fu had always been scared witless. What kind of character did old master have? Now that he had met Chu Ho, he was so unyielding. He didn't know if the two of them would get along well in the future. Chu Ho sighed and said, "I know. I'll go up and apply for leave." With that, she hurried upstairs. Chapter 3469. Uncle Fu turned around, picked up Xiao Bao, and coaxed him, "Uncle Fu will play with you, okay?" "Okay." After Chu Ho went upstairs, she first greeted Li Xiaofeng and changed the holiday to the morning. Li Xiaofeng naturally agreed very quickly. He didn't mention a word about what happened last night or the text message. Perhaps it was because he had drunk a little too much last night, so he had said some things on impulse. When he woke up and was sober, he kept a tight lid on what happened last night and didn't mention it. Chu Ho was naturally happy to see this happen. By the time she changed her clothes and went downstairs, Uncle Fu had already prepared her household register and ID card. When she saw the household register, Chu Ho was a little surprised. After she had settled down in the Gu household, the household register had become a problem. However, Uncle Fu was a know-it-all. In just a few days, he had helped her settle the problem. She came up with an identity and registered it under Uncle Fu's name as Chu Ho. Her identity would be that of a daughter. If it was based on the household register, Uncle Fu would be her father. Marriage registration at the Civil Affairs Bureau required a household register and identification card. Hence, Uncle Fu had already prepared these 4 items in advance. When Gu Jinglian came downstairs, Chu Ho was already waiting for him at the main entrance. The two of them got into the car, and Uncle Fu was moved to say goodbye with tears in his eyes. Ah! Old master was finally getting married. This was a joyous occasion. When the car arrived at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Chu Ho had just gotten out of the car when she saw couples coming and going in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Her lips twitched uncontrollably. Didn't they say there weren't many people? Why were there so many people? When Gu Jinglian got out of the car and saw so many people, he frowned and looked very unhappy. Because the decision to register for marriage was made suddenly, there was no special communication. Otherwise, they could have gone through the special procedures and processed it directly. But now, they could only line up obediently to get a number. Chu Ho rushed to the registration hall and left Gu Jinglian behind. She got a number at the window and turned around to see Gu Jinglian casually walking in. Many young couples were already sitting on the long benches and waiting. Chu Ho noticed that many of the couples were wearing white shirts. For a moment, she was a little confused. She then looked at herself. She was wearing an old casual shirt, a pair of trousers, and a pair of ordinary sneakers, which seemed out of place. The moment Gu Jinglian walked into the hall, his innate domineering aura instantly filled the air in every corner. Everyone looked at him and they were shocked by Gu's handsome looks. Is he a celebrity? Impossible, I've never heard of him. But he's so handsome. Did you notice? Why does he look a little like Gu Xingzi? What is this man here for? Don't tell me. Ah. Why do all the handsome men in the world belong to someone? I'm really curious who he's getting married to. Immediately after, the crowd saw this godlike perfect man walk in front of a woman who was dressed in rags. Everyone was silent. Why was it this poor-looking woman? It wouldn't be too shabby to call it ragged. It was just that her clothes were a little shabby. Chapter 3470. What about this woman? She was barefaced and dressed in a shabby casual shirt. Most importantly, she was even wearing sneakers. Sneakers. How tacky. She felt that she was standing next to this man. Chu Ho felt as if everyone was looking in her direction. There was disdain, and even hostility. Why were they all looking at her? Gu Jinglian asked expressionlessly, "How long do we have to wait?" "I don't know." Chu Ho glanced at the number plate and then at the window. She realized that the number plate on the window said number 28, and the number she was holding was 65. "We'll probably have to wait another hour." How troublesome. Gu Jinglian walked to an empty seat. Chu Ho also walked over and sat down beside him. Before she could sit down properly, the scrutinizing gazes from all directions became more obvious. For a moment, it felt like a sharp thorn in her back. Look at that woman. She's so poor. Why are the women that handsome men marry always so? It's hard to explain. Actually, this woman is quite pretty. It's just that her dressing is a little unsightly. Don't tell me that pair of sneakers was bought from a roadside stall. I saw that the man was wearing a Patek Philippe watch. I heard that it costs a few million each. It's my first time seeing a real watch. The watch on Gu Jinglian's wrist immediately attracted everyone's attention. Patek Philippe. It can't be a fake, right? It can't be a fake. It's very exquisite. Moreover, this man has a very good temperament. He's either rich or respectable. One look and you can tell that he's a rich man. Then how can he marry this woman? Even if he's poor, he should dress up a little when he comes to get a marriage certificate. He should at least wear a white shirt. Although the discussions were kept very low, they still reached Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho's ears very clearly. Gu Jinglian looked in the direction of the sound and narrowed his eyes dangerously. Those who were secretly discussing immediately turned their heads away in cold sweat, not daring to take another look. The world seemed to have finally quieted down. Gu Jinglian looked back again and sized up Chu Ho's clothes coldly. His handsome brows furrowed slightly. "Why are you wearing these clothes?" Chu Ho was speechless. "I just wear a few clothes." "Why didn't you buy clothes?" Gu Jinglian said a little unhappily, "I remember that Uncle Fu sends money to your account every month." "That's your money, why should I use it?" "Chu," he said coldly, "I have my own hands and feet. I can earn money to buy clothes." Why did she want to use his money to buy clothes? Gu Jinglian, this woman was so poor that she only had her backbone left. He suddenly stood up and said to her, "Get up." Chu, he stared at him blankly. "What?" "To buy clothes to buy." With that, he walked towards the door. His tone and tone were especially in line with his autocratic style. He did not seem to have asked for her opinion. Chu, he was flustered. "Hey. I don't need to buy any special clothes, right? It's just a marriage certificate." Seeing that Gu Jinglian was walking further and further away, she had no choice but to stand up reluctantly and chase after him. Behind her, a group of people looked at each other, not understanding the situation. What was going on? How could there be a woman who didn't like to shop, dress up, or buy clothes? From the man's tone, he would send money to the woman regularly every month. Could it be, she's not a kept woman, right? Why would a kept woman come here to get a marriage certificate? Chapter 3471. The Civil Affairs Bureau was next to the bustling city center. Gu Jinglian was walking far ahead. Chu Ho finally caught up with him and said unhappily, "Gu Jinglian, what are you trying to do?" Why was he always changing his mind? "Buying clothes." "What clothes are you buying?" Chu Ho said, "Is my outfit not good enough?" Moreover, we're here to register our marriage today. We can leave after registering. Is there a need to go through so much trouble? The main thing was that there wasn't enough time. She calculated the time. It was 9:30 in the morning. If she came back after shopping at the mall, the Civil Affairs Bureau would be closed and she would have to wait until the afternoon to register her marriage. Going back and forth would waste a lot of time. Gu Jinglian said unhappily, "How are you going to take photos in this outfit?" He was a typical bachelor. He was a perfectionist who couldn't tolerate even the slightest flaw. At first, he thought that registering their marriage would only require a certificate. However, he found out that they still needed to take photos. There were so many couples who came dressed up beautifully, but she was dressed so casually. He even wore a suit. How could he tolerate her dressing so crudely and taking photos with him? How was her outfit an eyesore to him? Was there a problem? Chu Ho's lips twitched violently. I couldn't tell that you even wanted to register your marriage perfectly. Gu Jinglian ignored her. He walked into a department store on his own. He followed behind him with a frustrated look on her face. Just now, when she walked in, the dazzling decorations and furnishings of the department store almost blinded her. It was too dazzling. She rubbed her eyes subconsciously and saw that Gu Jinglian had walked a long distance again. This guy. His legs were so long that every step he took covered a meter. Couldn't he walk slower? Chu Ho caught up with him, but he suddenly stopped in front of a clothing store. She couldn't stop in time and bumped into his back. She was dizzy from the impact. Go in. Every word that he said was incomparably stingy and precious. If he could express the meaning of a single word, he would not waste a single word more. Chu Ho reluctantly stepped in, and a gust of fragrant wind greeted her. Then, she was dazzled by the high-end fashions displayed in the wardrobe. Hello. The shop assistant came up to her, but before she could exchange greetings, she felt a gust of cold wind. She subconsciously looked behind Chu He, only to see a handsome but imposing man walking in. Gu Jinglian's cold and gloomy expression, as well as his incomparably noble posture of a superior, had an astonishing aura. The shop assistant was so scared that he froze on the spot. Gu Jinglian pushed Chu Ho in front of the shop assistant and ordered expressionlessly, "Pick out some clothes for her." "Yes, I'll pick it right away." The shop assistant was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. She immediately went to the wardrobe to pick out clothes. Chu Ho looked around and saw that the clothes in this clothing store were exquisite and beautiful, as if they were glowing. Why else would they say that you get what you pay for? Expensive things had their own reasons for being expensive. She pretended to be calm as she walked to the wardrobe and randomly picked out a piece of clothing. She picked up the price tag and glanced at it. Then, she pretended to be calm as she turned around and walked in front of Gu Jinglian. "Gu Jinglian, did you bring enough money?" "Money?" Gu Jinglian said confidently, "I didn't bring any money with me." Chu Ho lowered her voice and questioned, "Why did you come to the mall if you didn't bring any money?" Chapter 3472. I brought my credit card. Credit card? A credit card had a credit limit too. The clothes here were easily worth tens of thousands. Based on his rich and overbearing attitude, would a credit card really be enough for him? She asked doubtfully, "Is your credit card limit enough?" Gu Jinglian frowned and looked at her coldly. He didn't know what was wrong with this woman to doubt whether his credit card limit was enough. It was more than enough to buy the entire shopping mall, let alone a few clothes. Seeing that he was ignoring her, Chu Ho pinched his arm hard. However, she realized that his arm didn't look thick. When she pinched it, it was all firm muscles. She couldn't pinch it at all. It was scary. "Gu Jinglian. Don't sell me because you can't afford the clothes." Just as Chu Ho was feeling anxious, the shop assistant walked up to her from behind with a stack of clothes in her hands. She said respectfully, "Miss, please come to the fitting room to try on the clothes." "Gu Jinglian, why did you pick so many clothes?" She hated trying on clothes the most. It was so troublesome to take off her clothes and put them on again. Chu Ho braced herself and went into the fitting room. Gu Jinglian sat outside and waited. However, she didn't see her come out even after half an hour. The shop assistants looked at each other. Gu Jinglian was also suspicious. He walked to the door of the fitting room and kicked it. Is she dead in there? Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Who was this man to this woman? At first, they thought that they were a couple. However, seeing him kick the door so violently and speak so fiercely, they didn't seem like a couple. It seemed like he was here to collect a debt. Chu Ho's angry voice could be heard from the fitting room. What are you rushing me for? Shut up. Many of the clothes were skirts. Just zipping them took a lot of effort. Gu Jinglian finally lost his patience. He pushed the door open and was about to go in when Chu Ho immediately blocked the door. She said angrily, "What are you doing? Come out. I'm not done putting on my clothes." Gu Jinglian said impatiently, "I'll give you 10 seconds. After saying that, he raised his hand and stared at his watch. He was really counting the minutes and seconds. Chu Ho panicked. He fumbled around and pushed the door open at the last second, glaring at him with a red face. "Do you want to die? Why are you rushing me?" Gu Jinglian turned to look at her, but when she saw the clothes she was wearing, she was inexplicably stunned. Chu Ho was wearing a chiffon dress. The skirt was very low, barely reaching her knees, revealing a pair of slender legs. The design of this dress was particularly unique. The inside was made of pure white satin, and the outside was covered with a layer of gauze. The gauze was decorated with handmade flowers. When Chu Ho wore it, she looked like a flower fairy. He had never seen her in a dress. In the past, when she was still Red Lotus, she always wore black clothes and pants. Her hair was tied up high, giving people a very neutral feeling. Even after giving birth to Xiao Bao, her temperament didn't change much. When it came to dressing, she was still careless and perfunctory. She didn't like things that were too complicated. Hence, casual shirts and jeans were almost her standard outfit. This was because it was very simple to wear. She liked black clothes because they didn't get dirty easily. However, they didn't expect that when she dressed up meticulously, she wouldn't pale in comparison to those celebrities on TV. The shop assistants were deeply amazed. Chapter 3473. When Chu He first walked into the shop, she was dressed plainly and inconspicuously. She was the kind of person who, when thrown into a crowd, would usually not turn back to take a second look even if she was pretty and dressed in dull clothes. However, she had not put on any makeup. She was just wearing a dress, but she was already stunning. So beautiful. The shop assistant exclaimed from the bottom of her heart. It was not a compliment. Chu Ho tugged at the hem of her dress in embarrassment. When she saw Gu Jinglian's stunned gaze, she thought that she looked ugly in this dress. She said awkwardly, "Why is this dress so short?" Gu Jinglian reacted and asked unhappily, "Why were you in there for so long? Didn't you ask me to try on the clothes?" Chu Ho said, "There are so many clothes. It must take some effort to try them on one by one." Gu Jinglian was speechless. It turned out that this stupid woman really thought that trying on clothes was just trying on the size of the clothes. Could it be that she tried on one piece and then immediately took it off and changed into another one? That was why she was in there for so long. The shop assistant respectfully asked for Gu Jinglian's opinion. "Sir, what do you think of this dress?" Gu Jinglian sized her up. Even Chu Ho was waiting for his evaluation. "It's average." He abruptly uttered these two words, seeming to play it down. Average? Did average mean that it was barely pleasing to the eye? Chu Ho said, "It's not suitable for me to wear a dress." "Why is it not suitable?" The shop assistant said encouragingly, "Miss, you look beautiful in a dress." Gu Jinglian said, "Pack it all up." Pack it all up? The shop assistant was speechless. "Sir, you mean these clothes?" Gu Jinglian did not have the patience to listen to their nonsense. He handed over a black gold card and said, "Stop talking nonsense. Pack it all up." What a rich and imposing man. This man must be very rich. After the shop assistant passed the black gold card to the store manager finished settling the account. When she took the black gold card, she was so shocked that her eyes almost popped out. Did I see wrongly? The shop assistant became nervous. What's wrong? Store manager. Is there a problem with this card? If I'm not mistaken, this is the Black Gold Express Centurion card. This is also my first time seeing a real card. What is the Centurion Black Gold card? The Centurion Black Gold card was the highest level of high-end card launched by American Express. It was recognized as the king of cards. It was said that the Black Gold card was only available to the top groups, such as the dignitaries of various countries, royal families, billionaires, and celebrities from all walks of life. Generally, there was no upper limit. It was said that the cardholders could enjoy the exclusive treatment of the world's top members. There were not many cards issued in the country, only a few dozen. Moreover, they were issued in cooperation with major authoritative banks. So far as she knew, there were only a dozen of such cards circulating on the market. If this black gold card was real, then this man's identity, he was definitely a billionaire. Or perhaps it was a high-end socialite. Moreover, it wasn't something that one could have just because they were rich. The total cost of the entire set of clothes was about 100,000 yuan. The store manager wanted to give it a try, so she swiped her card, entered the amount, and successfully deducted the money. 100,000 yuan was a secret free limit? Chu Ho was still waiting in fear when she saw the store manager walk over with bags of various sizes and respectfully return the black gold card to Gu Jinglian. Chapter 3474. The card was swiped just like that? Didn't she need to key in the password? He was still wondering about this when she saw Gu Jinglian approaching another counter. She raised her head and said, Manolo. Blahnik. What brand was this? It was in Italian. When she walked in, she realized that there were high heels in the display window. When Chu Ho followed Gu Jinglian out again, she was wearing 8-centimeter high heels that were crooked and unstable. She had never worn high heels before, let alone such high heels. Not only did the tips of her feet hurt, but it was also difficult to walk on. Chu Ho felt particularly embarrassed. She could have caught up with Gu Jinglian at first, but now, she was left far behind. How hateful. She, who had always dressed neutrally, suddenly changed into a dress and wore high heels. She suddenly felt embarrassed as if she was a man dressed as a woman. It was especially awkward. Gu Jinglian turned around and suddenly realized that she had fallen far behind. He frowned and saw a woman with disheveled hair and a crooked dress walking towards him like a little duck. Chu Ho finally caught up with him and said angrily, "Can you walk slower?" Gu Jinglian frowned and said coldly, "So slow." Chu Ho kicked off her high heels and threw her bags on the ground angrily. She crossed her arms and said, "Gu Jinglian, what do you want? Are you teasing me? Is it fun to see me dressed so strangely? You can do whatever you want. You're used to doing whatever you want. I don't have the patience to play along." Gu Jinglian was speechless. People around them came and went. When they saw this scene, they all looked at them curiously. They saw a tall, slender, and handsome man standing face to face with a woman in a dress who looked rather pathetic. The two of them stared at each other as if they were confronting each other. The atmosphere was tense and ready to explode at any moment. Gu Jinglian sized up Chu Ho's ashen face. He narrowed his eyes and frowned coldly. Chu Ho originally thought that he was on the verge of exploding. However, she saw him slowly bend over and kneel on one knee in front of her. With one hand, he picked up the scattered high heels and gently opened his palm. His icy voice softened slightly. "Feet, stretch them out." He looked up at her. Chu Ho was a little surprised. "What? Feet?" He repeated, "Stretch it out." Gu Jinglian was known for his impatience and unpredictable temperament. To be precise, there was no sunny day on his face. If it wasn't dark clouds, then it was a violent storm. However, at this moment, he actually patiently repeated his words a second time. If it were in the past, it would have been impossible for this to happen. Chu-ho saw that he was holding the high heels and opened his palm. Could it be that he wanted to help her put on the shoes personally? The high and mighty old Master Gu was actually waiting on someone so patiently? Chu-ho didn't believe it. Hence, she stretched out her feet suspiciously. He was such a tall person, but her feet were only size 37. He held her feet in his palm, but he couldn't even hold them. His palms were so big that her feet looked so small in comparison. Gu Jinglian held up her feet and slowly put the high heels on her feet. Chu-ho saw this and was a little surprised. She couldn't help but laugh. The anger that had accumulated in her heart all dissipated. She couldn't help but say, I didn't expect Gu Jinglian to know how to help people put on shoes. Ha. Chapter 3475. Gu Jinglian's face immediately turned green. He held his breath and suddenly took off the high heels that he had put on. He suddenly stood up and stared at her condescendingly. Put them on yourself. Chu-ho was speechless. She looked at her feet. The high heels that she had put on were taken off by him and thrown aside. Her feet stepped on the cold marble floor, and the smile on her face suddenly froze. Just now, she was secretly laughing in her heart. Gu Jinglian, who had always been arrogant, would lower himself to serve someone. She had only laughed, but the man's face immediately darkened. Wasn't that too ungentlemanly? You, Gu Jinglian turned around arrogantly and walked away. What he hated the most was being bossed around by others. Chu-ho was speechless and was too lazy to argue with him. At least, she had enjoyed his service once and was satisfied. Only then did she put on her high heels again, picked up her big and small bags, and chased after him. Originally, the two of them were about to leave. Gu Jinglian passed by the jewelry counter. The clerk smiled and said, Sir, are you shopping with your girlfriend? Buy a ring for your girlfriend. Most of the clerks who could work at the counter of a department store were smart people. Just by looking at the customer's attire and temperament, they could judge the customer's purchasing power. Gu Jinglian was just passing by the counter, and the clerk's sharp eyes immediately saw the watch on his wrist. Patek Philippe. This was the king of Swiss watches. Patek Philippe was founded in 1839 and was the top of the top 10 watches in the world. He didn't get first place for nothing. The noble artistic realm and expensive production materials had shaped Patek Philippe's enduring brand value. The watch on Gu Jinglian's hand was a Patek Philippe Super Complicated Function Chronograph Series, a 5002p platinum mechanical watch. It was made of 950p platinum, with sophisticated workmanship, and was worth 17 million. It had to be said that the clerk's eyes were very sharp. Gu Jinglian did not even turn his head, but the clerk continued to say enthusiastically, Aren't you going to buy a ring for your girlfriend? Behind him, Chu-ho also walked over. When he saw the dazzling diamond necklace and ring on the counter, he couldn't help but feel dazzled. Gu Jinglian suddenly turned back to the counter and asked very seriously, Do I need to buy a ring for my wedding? Is this your girlfriend? The shop assistant glanced at Chu-ho and said with a smile, Your girlfriend is so beautiful. Are you getting married? Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly, Answer my question. The shop assistant froze. She was obviously shocked by Gu Jinglian's cold and gloomy expression. She subconsciously replied, Of course. Nowadays, people need to buy wedding rings when they get married. Did she find herself a rich man? She had invited a demon king to her side. This man, his aura is so strong, so terrifying. Chu-ho saw Gu Jinglian pause at the counter. She went forward to take a look and saw many beautiful diamond rings displayed on the counter. She looked up and saw the word, I, on the sign. The dew shines like gold. Even the sign wanted to be inlaid with diamonds. On the other side, the shop assistant gushed, How many young people nowadays don't buy a diamond ring when they get married? A wedding ring not only represents a promise, but also a beautiful true love and a sacred marriage. Chapter 3476. Gu Jinglian suddenly glanced at Chu-ho. His gaze fell on her hand that was carrying bags of various sizes. Her ring finger was bald and did not look good. He did not know much about the process of getting married. After all, he had originally planned not to get married for the rest of his life, so he did not pay attention to the complicated details of marriage. However, since this woman was Gu Jinglian's wife, she had to have what others had. Since they had to buy a diamond ring for their wedding, she had to have one too. Gu Jinglian said, "Pick one." Chu Ho was so engrossed in staring at the diamond rings on the counter that she did not immediately realize what Gu Jinglian had said. Gu Jinglian turned his head and repeated, "Pick one." Chu Ho looked up and was a little surprised. "What?" The shop assistant kindly explained, "Your husband wants you to pick a ring. You're getting engaged, right? You can't not buy a wedding ring." Chu Ho pondered for a moment and suddenly said, "Do we have to buy a wedding ring for our wedding?" She did not understand either. Everyone was silent. The shop assistant could not help but curse in her heart. "Your husband wears such an expensive watch that costs more than 10 million. Why does this woman look like she is not interested in a diamond ring? What kind of woman does not like diamonds? She must be a fake woman. Of course we have to buy a ring for our wedding." Chu Ho glanced at the counter again, but felt that all the rings looked the same. She could not help but shake her head and say, "I don't like any of them. Beautiful lady, the ones on display at this counter may not be to your liking. However, if you don't have any concerns about the price, I can recommend 2 treasures of our store." As she said that, the shop assistant immediately opened the safe and walked over with an exquisite box. The shop assistant put on a pair of gloves and carefully opened the ring. In an instant, a ray of light seemed to bloom. Inside the box, there was a ring with a unique design lying quietly. "This is one of the most high-end rings in our store, Tower Oath." She carefully lifted the ring and introduced it to Chu Ho. "Madam, take a look. The side of this ring is in the shape of the Eiffel Tower in France. If you put it under the light, it will project the shape of the Eiffel Tower. It's a 1-carat diamond, and the cutting is very delicate." Chu Ho was not interested. His only thought was that the diamond was so big and shiny. Seeing her indifferent look, the shop assistant was a little disappointed. "You don't like this one? It's too big. It looks very cumbersome." Perhaps it was because she had been carrying out missions for many years, but she was used to not having anything on hand. The shop assistant said, "You don't have to wear this wedding ring all the time. If it's inconvenient, you can take it off. If you don't like this one, I can recommend another one." Then, the clerk took out a box from the safe. Opening the box, Chu Ho inadvertently glanced at it and was attracted by the dazzling ring. The reason why he was attracted to it was not because of the 2.5-carat diamond, but because of its eye-catching design. This one is the True Love Coronation Princess. The True Love Coronation series is Ito's high-end customization. The True Love Coronation series uses a diamond inlaid design in the shape of a crown. The ruby on the side is just like the eye-catching highlight on the crown. It crowns every moving love and makes every bride a princess in a fairy tale. Pfft! Before Chu Ho could finish listening, she could not help but break down. "Princess?" Chapter 3477. What a childish way of putting it. However, the ring was indeed beautiful. From the side, the diamond-studded ring holder was indeed shaped like a crown, symbolizing the noble status of a queen. The claw links were shaped like a lotus flower, symbolizing the purity of a girl. The rubies inlaid on both sides were the most expensive of the 4 major gemstones and were quite rare. In Europe, the rare rubies represented the symbol of power. Although Chu Ho was not interested in diamonds, she could not deny that the ring was indeed beautiful. She asked casually, "How much is it?" The shop assistant smiled. 200,000 yuan. Chu Ho thought that she had heard wrongly and asked again, "How much?" The shop assistant was still smiling perfectly. 200,000 yuan, madam. That's so expensive. Chu Ho calculated in her mind. 200,000 yuan. Based on her monthly salary of more than 5,000 yuan, 60,000 yuan a year. Even if she did not eat or drink, she would only be able to afford it after 4 years. So expensive. Chu Ho asked again, 200,000 yuan, right? 200,000 yuan is only the price of the woman's ring, madam. And it was only the price of a single woman's ring? Chu Ho felt that she could not stand properly and was seeing stars. Many banknotes were floating around in her head. 200,000 yuan, 200,000 yuan, so expensive, so expensive. Just as he was in a state of confusion. This is it. Gu Jinglian said, put it on her. The shop assistant immediately said to Chu Ho, madam, would you like to try it on? Chu Ho was a little wary. Do I need to pay to try it on? The smile on the shop assistant's face froze. She blinked for a long time and then said with a stiff smile, no need, madam. Chu Ho then stretched out her hand. Her right hand had 5 slender fingers with distinct joints. Her hand was the kind that was very good-looking, fair and slender. But on the other hand, it was not nice to look at. There were many scars on her palm. Some were from training, and some were from carrying out missions. The shop assistant put the True Love crown diamond ring on her finger. Under the light, along with her movements, every angle of the ring glowed brightly. It was too beautiful. Even he could not help but feel a little tempted. Her fingers were not thick, so number 9 was just right to wear it. The shop assistant then said to Gu Jinglian, sir, I'll get you the man's ring. Gu Jinglian didn't say a word. He just stared at Chu Ho's hand. The resplendent diamond was especially beautiful against her fair skin. Gu Jinglian didn't care how much this ring cost or what its price was. He only cared about whether it looked good or not. The shop assistant took the ring and was about to put it on him when Gu Jinglian said, I'll do it myself. I'll do it for you, sir. Your hands are dirty. Gu Jinglian frowned in disgust. His eyes were dangerous and his tone was cold. Don't touch me. The shop assistant was speechless. The employees at the counter were almost frozen into ice by the cold aura emitted from his body. He had a serious case of mysophobia and couldn't stand being touched by others. Even though the black gold card had just passed through someone else's hands, he had to wipe it once before receiving it. The shop assistant was completely flustered. This customer was really the best. The woman was foolishly arguing about the price, but the man had a cold expression that said, strangers shouldn't come near. However, if she sold this pair of rings, her performance for this month would be considered to have reached the target in advance. Gu Jinglian had worn the diamond ring himself before. It was just right on his ring finger. Chapter 3478. The shop assistant continued, because it's a man's ring, there isn't much fanfare about the design. Men are more reserved. However, the main attraction is the engraving on the back of the ring. There are 2 very small rubies inlaid. This also has a meaning. It means that love is in the heart. Chu Ho leaned closer to Gu Jinglian and said in a low voice, 200,000, Gu Jinglian. That's too expensive. It's just a pair of rings. There's no need to be so expensive, right? Gu Jinglian didn't even raise his head and said, how much? A total of 300,000, sir. Gu Jinglian handed over his credit card. The shop assistant took it and realized that it was a card she had never seen before. The store manager took a look and was shocked. Black gold card. The shop assistant lowered her voice and said, what's a black gold card? I'll tell you later. Swipe the card first. The shop assistant was afraid that Chu Ho would regret it, so she quickly took the card and swiped it. After swiping the money, the shop assistant asked respectfully, would you like me to wrap it up for you? Gu Jinglian said, no need. To him, since he was wearing the ring on his finger, there was no reason to take it off. Otherwise, what was the point of a wedding ring? Then the after-sales card, Gu Jinglian said, no need. The store manager stared blankly at Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho as they left. Beside her, the shop assistant asked carefully, what's a black gold card? That's a high-end card issued by American Express all over the world. The people who have it are either billionaires or celebrities. The shop assistant was stunned. Such a young man was actually a billionaire? At first, she had some doubts about whether the watch on Gu Jinglian's hand was a fake. Otherwise, a man who wore a watch worth more than 10 million yuan would obviously have a poor girlfriend. She didn't expect, when they left the department store, they used the VIP service to send the clothes and high heels they bought back to the Gu family's house. When Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho returned to the Civil Affairs Bureau again, it happened to be number 64's turn. When they walked into the registration hall, the newlyweds who had just registered their marriage and hadn't left yet were choosing souvenirs or taking photos with them were stunned when they saw Chu Ho and Gu Jinglian return and saw that Chu Ho had changed his clothes and sports shoes into high heels. He was very adaptable. Although she was not used to it, she had gotten used to wearing high heels along the way and was able to walk with ease. When she saw them leave just now, she thought that the two of them had quarreled and decided not to register their marriage. She didn't expect that they actually went to the department store next door to buy clothes. Someone noticed the ring on Chu He's finger and sucked in a breath of cold air. Oh my God! What a big diamond ring! This ring, it must be at least 1 carat least. What's with that look on your face? Have you never seen a 1 carat diamond ring? How can it? There must be 2 carats is this. How much is this? Wait a minute, I saw this ring when I was shopping yesterday. This isn't a Do True Love coronation series? Is it expensive? 2 carats is worth at least 100,000 yuan. Chu Ho stared at the number displayed on the window. Finally, it was her turn. She walked over and took the application form. When she came back, she and Gu Jinglian each took one. What's this? Application form. Fill it out. How do I fill it out? You're so stupid. Let me do it. Chapter 3479. Gu Jinglian looked at her fixedly, only to see her head lowered. She held a pen and focused on filling in the information on the form. She lowered her head, and her fringe fell slightly, covering her eyebrows. Gu Jinglian instinctively reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear. Chu Ho couldn't help but be startled. She was obviously not used to his seemingly intimate behavior. Her expression was a little unnatural as she said, "It's nothing." Gu Jinglian reacted and realized what he was doing. He awkwardly retracted his hand and turned his head with a dark expression. He lazily propped his chin up and no longer looked at her. After filling in the form, Chu Ho stood up and walked to the window. However, she was told to press her fingerprint, so she turned back and said to Gu Jinglian, "You have to go with me." "What for?" "You have to sign it." "Sign it?" Chu Ho obviously didn't describe it well enough, so Gu Jinglian immediately thought of an indenture. Was this a marriage certificate or an indenture? Why did she have to sign it? When he was pulled to the window by Chu Ho pointed to the ink pad and said, "Press your fingerprint." Gu Jinglian's face was cold, and his eyebrows were a little pale. It turned out that they were going to press their fingerprint. The staff member looked up and saw Gu Jinglian pressing the ink pad with a sullen face. She couldn't help but think to herself, could this be the rumored forced marriage? Gu Jinglian pressed his fingerprint on the signature area and returned to his seat. Chu Ho asked, "Is this okay? Where are the documents?" It was the staff member's first time seeing such a weirdo. She patiently asked, "Do you have a photo?" "Photo? What photo?" "The photo on the marriage certificate." Chu Ho was confused and asked a very retarded question, "Does a marriage certificate need a photo?" Where did this weirdo come from? Didn't he know that a marriage certificate needed a photo? The staff member took a deep breath and then picked up the 2-inch topless photo provided by the previous couple to show her. "Here. You don't have such a thing, do you?" Chu Ho said blankly. "I didn't." "It doesn't matter if you didn't film it. You can film it now too." As the staff member spoke, he pointed to the price list hanging at the side and said, "But there's a fee for taking photos on the spot." What he meant was, hurry up and fork out the money. Chu Ho glanced at the price list. The production cost of the ID card was 20 yuan, and the photo cost 20 yuan as well. It was a total of 40 yuan. She suddenly looked into the distance. It was 40 yuan. She had left in a hurry and seemed to have forgotten to bring her wallet. Chu Ho searched her pockets with great effort. Suddenly, she realized that she was wearing a dress with no pockets, and it was newly bought. She returned to Gu Jinglian's side and shrugged at him. Money. Did you bring any money? Gu Jinglian was getting impatient. What money? Chu Ho imitated the staff member and pointed to the price list. Gu Jinglian looked up at the price list and pursed his lips. Then, he took out the all-purpose black gold card. After taking the black gold card, Chu Ho was a little confused. You can swipe a card here? I don't know. Chu Ho wanted to give it a try. She took the black gold card and walked to the window. She cleared her throat and asked awkwardly, Can I swipe a card? The staff members turned around and looked at her as if she was an idiot. They said word by word, we only accept cash. Chu Ho was speechless. Half an hour later, Uncle Fu rushed over with the wallet. Chapter 3480. Gu Jinglian sat on the bench. His face was dark, and he was obviously on the verge of exploding. Why did it take so long to get a marriage certificate? He said coldly, it's a waste of time. Chu Ho stood aside speechlessly, holding her forehead. We could have gotten it done in the morning, but you insisted on buying clothes. Gu Jinglian glared at her, but Chu Ho glared back at him indignantly. Uncle Fu walked over and handed her the wallet. He asked, why didn't you bring any money with you? I thought we didn't need money to get a marriage certificate. The Civil Affairs Bureau is not a charity. Uncle Fu looked at the time. There was still more than an hour before the afternoon shift. He said, it's time for everyone to get off work. Old master, why don't we go for lunch first? Gu Jinglian did not say a word. It was obvious that he did not want to move. After running around in the mall for so long, it was obvious that he did not want to go out again. Uncle Fu saw this and felt helpless. He walked aside and made a phone call. When it was time for work in the afternoon, a few staff members walked to the window and discussed, I met a pair of strange newlyweds this morning. The man looked unwilling, as if he was being forced to get married. Oh, I saw it too. That man is so handsome. However, it gives people a very terrifying feeling. I always feel that it has a very strong baleful aura. I heard that they came early in the morning and got their number plates. When it was their turn, they didn't bring any money. I'm dying of laughter. The group of people laughed as they walked into the hall. As soon as they walked in, they smelled a tempting fragrance. Then, they followed the fragrance into the hall and were all dumbfounded. In the hall, the benches had been pushed to the side, and there was a wooden dining table in the middle. On the table, exquisite and gorgeous dishes were placed, and the aroma was overwhelming. The whole scene was gorgeous and out of place in the Civil Affairs Bureau's shabby registration hall. Especially the cutlery, which was made of high-quality silver and was incomparably exquisite. On the side, Uncle Fu and a few chefs stood respectfully. At the dining table, Gu Jinglian ate elegantly. Even in such a simple setting, he still maintained the manners of an aristocrat. On the other hand, Chu Ho sat opposite him and forced himself to eat. Just half an hour ago, Uncle Fu called the Eastern Purple Chi restaurant, the most luxurious Chinese restaurant in the capital. Hence, the manager of the restaurant personally led a group of people to move the table and sumptuous delicacies over. Before the meal, the hotel manager personally sprayed disinfectant on the table and wiped it several times. Only then did Gu Jinglian leisurely sit at the table. This is change. Pervert. Ah. Chu Ho was dumbfounded when he saw the group of people carrying in the luxurious dining table. Speaking of which, it was just a meal. Was there a need to make such a big fuss? Eating a bowl of noodles at a roadside stall is fine too. However, after thinking about it carefully, with Gu Jinglian's temperament, it seemed unlikely that he would lower himself and be willing to squeeze into such a simple table at a roadside stall. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they came. Chu Ho braced himself and sat down. The staff members were dumbfounded. What the F***ck is going on? What kind of place did he think the Civil Affairs Bureau was? A restaurant? Just as they were about to walk over angrily and argue with him, Uncle Fu walked over and whispered a few words. When the women heard this, their eyes widened and they trembled in fear. What, the man sitting at the table eating at this moment was actually, God, they seemed to be very rude to this man in the morning, right? Chapter 3481. In the studio. Several crew members swarmed into the studio. Some pulled up the red curtain, some wiped the stools, and some mopped the floor until the entire studio was spotless. They walked to the door with obsequious expressions and bowed to Gu Jinglian. Mr. Gu, please come in. Please come in. Gu Jinglian tugged at his tie and walked in. Beside him, Chu Ho looked at them from the corner of her eyes. She was doubting her life. Were these crew members really the same people who had treated her so elegantly and coldly in the morning? Why did they suddenly change their attitude? Chu Ho walked in with a suspicious expression. She saw the crew members respectfully escorting Gu Jinglian to the stool like a servant. They turned around and smiled politely at Chu Ho. Her face instantly wrinkled into a chrysanthemum. Could they be more normal? She felt a chill run down her spine. Chu Ho walked awkwardly to Gu Jinglian's side and sat down. The crew member walked to the back of the camera and glanced at the lens. She smiled and said, "Sit closer." Chu Ho instantly had goosebumps all over her body. She leaned closer to Gu Jinglian. "Can I?" The crew member glanced at the camera again and felt that Gu Jinglian was about to go out of frame. "Sir, come over here a little." Gu Jinglian looked at her coldly and slowly moved towards Chu Ho. "Come closer." Gu Jinglian moved a little more. "Be more intimate. It looks very distant." The man should put his arm on the woman's shoulder. "It's more natural." Gu Jinglian raised his arm and pulled Chu Ho to his side. Chu Ho was speechless. The crew member was speechless. Gu Jinglian said impatiently, "Hurry up and take the photos." "Yes. Yes." The staff member nodded his head like he was pounding garlic and took a few photos with a click 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 sound. When the photos were developed, they were taken directly to make a certificate. When Chu Ho received the marriage certificate, in the photo, Gu Jinglian had one arm around her shoulder. He looked extremely domineering. There was no expression on his face. He did not have the joy of other newlyweds, nor did he have a trace of a smile. His face was cold from beginning to end. At the very least, she curled the corners of her mouth slightly. Although her smile wasn't obvious, it wasn't so stiff. Forget it. It was just a certificate. Even after returning home, it would be locked in the drawer to collect dust. Chu Ho walked over to Gu Jinglian and handed him a red document. "Here, it's yours." "2 portions?" "Yes, one for the man and one for the woman." Chu Ho looked at the time and quickly said, "Okay, I'm ready to go to work." After that, she ignored Gu Jinglian and left in a hurry after saying goodbye to Uncle Fu. Gu Jinglian looked at the marriage certificate in his hand and flipped it open. In the photo, the two of them looked awkward but intimate. This was the first time he had taken such a photo with a woman. This woman was now officially his wife. There was an extremely strange and awkward feeling that inexplicably arose spontaneously. Uncle Fu walked over and saw Gu Jinglian staring at the photo on the marriage certificate. He quietly asked, "Master, shall we go home?" His voice broke his train of thought. Gu Jinglian looked up and handed the certificate to him. "You're in charge of keeping it." Uncle Fu took the marriage certificate like it was a treasure. He flipped it open and looked at it. He was instantly beaming with joy. Gu Jinglian suddenly warned coldly, "No one is allowed to see it. Do you hear me?" Chapter 3482. Gu Jinglian sat on the bench. His face was dark, and he was obviously on the verge of exploding. Why did it take so long to get a marriage certificate? He said coldly, "It's a waste of time." Chu Ho stood aside speechlessly, holding her forehead. "We could have gotten it done in the morning, but you insisted on buying clothes." Gu Jinglian glared at her, but Chu Ho glared back at him indignantly. Uncle Fu walked over and handed her the wallet, asking, "Why didn't you bring any money with you?" "I thought we didn't need money to get a marriage certificate. The Civil Affairs Bureau is not a charity." Uncle Fu looked at the time. There was still more than an hour before the afternoon shift. He said, "It's time for everyone to get off work. Old master, why don't we go eat first?" Gu Jinglian did not say a word. It was obvious that he did not want to move. After running around in the mall for so long, it was obvious that he did not want to go out again. Uncle Fu saw this and felt helpless. He walked aside and made a phone call. At work in the afternoon, a few staff members walked to the window and discussed, "I met a pair of strange newlyweds this morning." The man looked unwilling, as if he was being forced to get married. "Oh, I saw it too. That man is so handsome. However, it gives people a very terrifying feeling. I always feel that it has a very strong baleful aura. I heard that they came early in the morning and got their number plates. When it was their turn, they didn't bring any money." I'm dying of laughter. A group of people laughed as they walked into the hall. As soon as they walked in, they smelled a tempting fragrance. Then, they followed the fragrance into the hall and were all dumbfounded. In the hall, the benches had been pushed to the side, and there was a wooden dining table in the middle. On the table, exquisite and gorgeous dishes were placed, and the aroma was overwhelming. The whole scene was gorgeous and out of place in the Civil Affairs Bureau's shabby registration hall. Especially the cutlery, which was made of high-quality silver and was incomparably exquisite. On the side, Uncle Fu and a few chefs stood respectfully. At the dining table, Gu Jinglian ate elegantly. Even in such a simple setting, he still maintained the manners of an aristocrat. On the other hand, Chu Ho sat opposite him and forced himself to eat. Just half an hour ago, Uncle Fu called the Eastern Purple Chi restaurant the most luxurious Chinese restaurant in the capital. Hence, the manager of the restaurant personally led a group of people to move the table and sumptuous delicacies over. Before the meal, the hotel manager personally sprayed disinfectant on the table and wiped it several times. Only then did Gu Jinglian leisurely sit at the table. "This is change. Pervert." Ah. Chu Ho was dumbfounded when he saw the group of people carrying in the luxurious dining table. Speaking of which, it was just a meal. Was there a need to make such a big fuss? Eating a bowl of noodles at a roadside stall is fine too. However, after thinking about it carefully, with Gu Jinglian's temperament, it seemed unlikely that he would lower himself and be willing to squeeze into such a simple table at a roadside stall. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they came. Chu Ho braced himself and sat down. The staff members were dumbfounded. What the F*** is going on? What kind of place did he think the Civil Affairs Bureau was? A restaurant? Just as they were about to walk over angrily and argue with him, Uncle Fu walked over and whispered a few words. When the women heard this, their eyes widened and they trembled in fear. What, the man sitting at the table eating at this moment was actually, God, they seemed to be very rude to this man in the morning, right? Chapter 3483. In the studio. A few staff members swarmed into the studio. Some pulled up the red curtain, some wiped the stools, and some mopped the floor until the entire studio was spotless. They walked to the door with obsequious expressions and bowed to Gu Jinglian. "Mr. Gu, please come in." Please come in." Gu Jinglian tugged at his tie and walked in. Chu Ho looked at them from the corner of her eyes. She was doubting her life. Were these staff members really the same people who had treated her so elegantly and coldly in the morning? Why did they suddenly change their attitude? Chu Ho walked in with a suspicious expression. She saw the staff members respectfully escorting Gu Jinglian to the stool like a servant. They turned around and smiled politely at Chu Ho. Her face instantly wrinkled into a chrysanthemum. Could they be more normal? She felt a chill run down her spine. Chu Ho walked awkwardly to Gu Jinglian's side and sat down. The staff member walked to the back of the camera and glanced at the lens. She smiled and said, "Sit closer." Chu Ho instantly had goosebumps all over her body. She leaned closer to Gu Jinglian. "Can I?" The staff member glanced at the camera again. She felt that Gu Jinglian was about to go out of the frame. "Sir, come closer." Gu Jinglian looked at her coldly and slowly moved towards Chu Ho. "Come closer." Gu Jinglian moved a little more. "Be more intimate. It looks very distant." The man should put his arm on the woman's shoulder. "It's more natural." Gu Jinglian raised his arm and pulled Chu Ho to his side. Chu Ho was speechless. The staff member was speechless. Gu Jinglian said impatiently, "Hurry up and take the photos." "Yes, yes." The staff member nodded his head like he was pounding garlic and took a few photos with a click 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 sound. When the photos were developed, they were taken directly to make a certificate. When Chu Ho received the marriage certificate, in the photo, Gu Jinglian had one arm around her shoulder. He looked extremely domineering. There was no expression on his face. He did not have the joy of other newlyweds, nor did he have a trace of a smile. His face was cold from beginning to end. At the very least, she curled the corners of her mouth slightly. Although her smile wasn't obvious, it wasn't so stiff. Forget it. It was just a certificate. Even after returning home, it would be locked in the drawer to collect dust. Chu Ho walked over to Gu Jinglian and handed him a red document. "Here, it's yours." "2 portions?" "Yes, one for the man and one for the woman." Chu Ho looked at the time and quickly said, "Okay, I'm ready to go to work." After that, she ignored Gu Jinglian and left in a hurry after saying goodbye to Uncle Fu. Gu Jinglian looked at the marriage certificate in his hand and flipped it open. In the photo, the two of them looked awkward but intimate. This was the first time he had taken such a photo with a woman. This woman was now officially his wife. There was an extremely strange and awkward feeling that inexplicably arose spontaneously. Uncle Fu walked over and saw Gu Jinglian staring at the photo on the marriage certificate. He quietly asked, "Master, shall we go home?" His voice broke his train of thought. Gu Jinglian looked up and handed the certificate to him. "You're in charge of keeping it." Uncle Fu took the marriage certificate like it was a treasure. He flipped it open and looked at it. He was instantly beaming with joy. Gu Jinglian suddenly warned coldly, "No one is allowed to see it. Do you hear me?" Chapter 3484. In this country, there was no such thing as mercenaries. Any mercenaries were illegal to exist. Only in other countries, especially in war-torn areas, there were mercenary groups with extremely impressive backgrounds. Chu Ho asked back, "What's so strange about that? Aren't you afraid of death?" "If I was afraid of death, I wouldn't have engaged in such a profession. However, being afraid of death doesn't mean that I want to die. Everyone wants to live well. If you don't want to live, it's easier to commit suicide by jumping into the river." Becoming a mercenary was to survive. Mercenaries had a high salary and a considerable income. Generally, taking on a mission, the salary started at 100,000 yuan. In that era, it was definitely beyond the reach of many people. Logically speaking, after so many years, Chu Ho should have accumulated a lot of wealth. She had indeed accumulated a lot of wealth. In the mercenary career that lasted for more than 3 years, she had accumulated a few million yuan in assets. However, other than her daily expenses and the apartment she bought in San Francisco, she later donated everything to a refugee charity. When she was in Interpol, her salary was much lower than when she was a mercenary. Later, after she went missing, the organization must have thought that she was dead, so they might have cancelled her account. She didn't miss that little bit of assets. It was also difficult for Chu Ho to talk about the past. For some reason, after getting the marriage certificate today, she inexplicably felt a lot of emotions. In the past, she didn't even dare to think that she would one day live such a stable life. She had a husband in name, children, and a complete family. Things that she didn't even dare to dream of had happened. Maybe it has something to do with the situation when I was young. Chu Ho looked out of the window, but her expression was very calm. Since I was young, the country I was born in was filled with countless wars and disputes. When I was young, I experienced a very big change. My family was destroyed and I was homeless. I boarded a humanitarian rescue ship from the United States and safely arrived at the pure land of the United States. In the beginning, I became a mercenary because I wanted revenge. Revenge? I wanted to become stronger and then maintain peace. When I became strong enough, I would kill those enemies with my own hands. However, when I grew up, I realized that the rebel organization that destroyed my family had long been eliminated. Thus, this wish became the wish to maintain world peace. As Chu Ho spoke, he was amused by the childish thoughts of his youth. He actually had such a childish childhood. Isn't it funny? When I was young, being a mercenary was a sacred profession in my eyes. That's because in many war-torn countries, in addition to the peacekeeping forces, the ones fighting against many rebel groups are mercenaries dispatched by the government. I was rescued from the flames of war by a mercenary. At that time, I thought that when I grew up, I must become such a brave person. However, when she grew up, she realized that the world was actually so complicated. It was not as simple as she had imagined. It was the law of the jungle. The weak were destined to have no place to survive. Those organizations that had originally judged the government were only resisting because of the government's incompetence and misuse of power. As for the troops who claimed to be righteous, most of them were just invaders for the sake of the country's own interests or for the sake of the local oil and natural gas resources. Chapter 3485. In this world, there's no such thing as absolute justice or absolute evil. There's only the strong and the weak. Chu Ho said slowly, maybe what I'm saying sounds funny, but maybe the absolute justice in your eyes is just self-interest and a high-sounding doctrine. Li Xiaofeng stared at her blankly, unable to digest what she had said. Chu Ho noticed that he kept looking at her and couldn't help but feel strange. What's wrong? Nothing. It's just that this is the first time I've heard someone say that. Li Xiaofeng shook his head and sighed. Maybe it's just as you said, there's no such thing as absolute justice in this world. He changed the topic and asked, then why did you leave Interpol? Interpol is the most authoritative organization for justice. I heard that you used to be the top anti-crime inspector. Why did you come here and become a lowly police officer? Chu Ho pursed her lips and said, I just went with the flow. When Gu Jinglian came back from the company, he had just stepped through the door when he vaguely heard a few of his subordinates standing at the side and discussing. I didn't expect Old Master to be so photogenic. Even if it's a celebrity photo, it doesn't look good. But Sister Chu looks a little chubby in the photo. Luckily, she's too skinny, so she looks better in front of the camera. You didn't see how happy Uncle Fu was today. Now that Old Master and Sister Chu are married, he can finally get rid of one of his worries. The two men were cleaning the courtyard and discussing excitedly. As they were cleaning, they suddenly caught sight of a pair of exquisite leather shoes. The two men's expressions changed and they followed the pair of slender legs. Gu Jinglian's gloomy and handsome face came into view. The two men's eyelids twitched violently and the corners of their lips twitched for a while. They stood upright awkwardly and gave a flattering smile. Old Master. Ha. You're back. Ha. Gu Jinglian glanced at them and asked coldly, where did you see the photo? It's the photo on Old Master's marriage certificate. Halfway through their words, the two of them didn't dare to continue. This was because they saw Gu Jinglian's face getting darker and darker. Uncle Fu. Gu Jinglian went upstairs and kicked open the door of the study. Uncle Fu was wiping the table carefully. He was so shocked by the loud noise that the cloth almost flew away. Uncle Fu turned around. He was so frightened by Gu Jinglian's aggressive look that he hiccuped and stammered, Master. He eagerly went up to greet him. Hee, you're back. Gu Jinglian's face was livid as he grabbed his collar and glared at him. He gritted his teeth and asked, where's the marriage certificate? Yes, it's in your drawer. Didn't I tell you not to show it to others? Gu Jinglian leaned closer to him and asked coldly, are you ignoring me? F***ck. He had been betrayed. Who was the shameless blabbermouth? Didn't he warn him to keep it a secret? I kept it well. Uncle Fu immediately put on a stern face and said righteously, it must have been someone who secretly looked at it. Gu Jinglian narrowed his eyes. You mean those people lined up to sneak into the study to look at it? Uncle Fu was speechless. Someone please come and save him. Chapter 3486. Dad. You're back. Xiao Bao skipped into the room and hugged Gu Jinglian's thigh tightly. When Uncle Fu heard Xiao Bao's voice, he was so moved that tears and snot flowed down his face. He was practically an angel. He had rescued him from the abyss of suffering in an instant. Xiao Bao's appearance somewhat diverted Gu Jinglian's attention. Uncle Fu carefully pried Gu Jinglian's fingers away from his collar. Then, he took half a step back dejectedly. Just as he picked up the rag from the floor, he heard Xiao Bao say excitedly, Dad, Uncle Fu showed me your and Mom's marriage certificate. The photo is so beautiful. The main thing is that Dad is handsome and Mom is beautiful. Wow. It's so perfect. They were a perfect match. When Uncle Fu heard this, he was stunned as if he had been struck by lightning. Behind him, Gu Jinglian's face darkened. His sinister voice sounded as if it came from hell. Uncle Fu? Whoosh. He did not know how such an old man could be so nimble. He actually slipped away in an instant, as if there was oil on the soles of his feet. Gu Jinglian was so angry that he clenched his fists. However, he saw Xiao Bao walk in front of him and open his arms to ask for a hug. Hug, hug. He acted coquettishly and asked for a hug and love. Gu Jinglian's expression softened a little. He bent down slightly and picked him up. Little Bao held his father's face in his hands and kissed him on both cheeks. Daddy is so obedient. Dad is so great. Gu Jinglian was speechless. What the hell? This was the first time he had been praised by someone with such a strange word like good. And he was only a 6-year-old child. Gu Jinglian carried him to the sofa. His eyes were very gloomy, very gloomy. When he thought about how his warning to Uncle Fu had been ignored by that old man, he couldn't help but feel angry. I told him to take good care of it and not let anyone see it, but he actually came back and passed it around. Seeing his gloomy face, Xiao Bao patted his face with his little hand. Daddy, what's wrong? He seemed to be very unhappy. Today is a joyous day, don't put on such a long face. Big day? Gu Jinglian grabbed his hand and warned him coldly, don't hit Dad's face. Why? Very disrespectful. Xiao Bao nodded as if he understood. Then, he puffed out his chest and said righteously, Daddy, you're not allowed to hit my head from now on. Xiao Bao said seriously, because that's also very disrespectful. Pa, Gu Jinglian smacked him on the head. Xiao Bao immediately hugged his head and said angrily, what are you doing? Asking for a beating? How am I asking for a beating? Did I say something wrong? Gu Jinglian reminded him, when will you be my father? Only then will it be your turn to educate me. Xiao Bao looked like a little adult and muttered angrily, I want to be your father, but unfortunately, I don't have the chance. However, if I really have a disobedient son like you, I will definitely be angry and my life will be shortened. Gu Jinglian was speechless. He closed his eyes and clenched his fists, resisting the urge to hit him. Xiao Bao said again, you don't know how to cherish such a cute son like me. You have to know that being my father is a blessing that you've accumulated over several lifetimes. Gu Jinglian was speechless. He suddenly pinched Xiao Bao's chubby cheeks and said coldly, if you talk nonsense again, I'll hit you. Chapter 3487. The father and son held on tightly to each other as they ravaged each other. However, Xiao Bao was obviously at a disadvantage. His chubby little fingers were not as long as Gu Jinglian's, nor were they as strong as his. After a while, Gu Jinglian did not feel anything, but he felt like his face was about to be torn apart. Torn. Torn. It hurts. Xiao Bao protested pitifully. Don't pinch anymore, sob. Don't pinch anymore, Gu Jinglian frowned. He grabbed his chubby cheeks and played with them. Yes, it felt good. Just like a glutinous rice ball. Xiao Bao was Xiao Bao. He might as well change his name to Little Bun. The chubby baby fat was so pleasing to the touch that Gu Jinglian could not help but relax his brows. Even the knot in his heart disappeared. However, Xiao Bao, who was being ravaged in his hands, was suffering unspeakably. He punched and hit like an angry cat, using his hands and feet to protest. Gu Jinglian finally let go of him. Xiao Bao covered his face in pain. He looked like a storm was coming, as if a dam was about to burst. Gu Jinglian casually picked up the afternoon snack and stuffed it into his mouth. Xiao Bao was speechless. He licked it with his tongue and the pain on his face disappeared immediately. He said in surprise, "Wow, it's so sweet." The child's face was indeed like the weather in June, changing as quickly as it wanted. Xiao Bao looked at the snacks on the coffee table. These were pastries that Uncle Fu had prepared in advance. Gu Jinglian casually stuffed them into his mouth. They were rose pastries. It was Xiao Bao's first time eating such delicious snacks. He reached out to take them. Slap. Gu Jinglian slapped his hand away. Xiao Bao retracted his hand in pain and glared at him fiercely. Then, he reached out to take them again. Slap. You're not allowed to eat them. Gu Jinglian refused coldly, "They're mine." Stingy brat. Xiao Bao sat down on the carpet and hugged his arms with an aggrieved expression. Gu Jinglian picked up the pastry, pinched a rose pastry with his long fingers, and took a bite. He then looked at Xiao Bao, only to see a certain guy with a greedy expression, almost drooling. "You want to eat?" "Yes, yes." Xiao Bao quickly nodded, expressing his position. Gu Jinglian suddenly curled his lips and said slowly, "That depends on whether you have the ability to eat it." Uncle Fu had just finished tidying up the other rooms. When he passed by the study, he casually pushed open the door and saw Gu Jinglian sitting leisurely on the sofa. He casually picked up a piece of rose pastry and then casually threw it out like a parabola. Xiao Bao immediately straightened his neck and opened his mouth wide to receive the rose crisp. Ah woo. After experiencing 2 failures, he was amazed this time. First, he predicted where Gu Jinglian would throw the rose pastry. As such, as soon as the rose pastry was thrown, he reacted in time and leaned over. With his mouth open, he caught the rose pastry steadily. Gu Jinglian praised generously, "Beautiful." Xiao Bao was extremely pleased. He puffed out his chest and looked very proud. Uncle Fu was petrified. "Dad, am I awesome?" Xiao Bao lay on his lap with an expression that said, "Come and praise me, come and praise me." If he had a tail, it would be wagging vigorously at this moment. Gu Jinglian patted his head, "Yes, you're awesome." Hee hee. Xiao Bao caught a glimpse of Uncle Fu from the corner of his eye and immediately turned to Uncle Fu, saying, "Uncle Fu, come and play with us. This game is very fun." Chapter 3488. Uncle Fu immediately cleared his throat and said, "I still have something to do." With that, he turned around and slipped away. Uncle Fu was about to teach those little rascals a lesson. How dare they bring up the matter of him circulating Old Master's marriage certificate in front of Old Master. Now that he had offended Old Master, he wouldn't dare to show his face in front of him for a few days. Uncle Fu closed the door behind him. Gu Jinglian turned around and saw Xiao Bao looking at him expectantly. "Let's continue playing. Let's continue playing. This game is so fun." It was much more fun than playing video games. More importantly, no matter what game it was, as long as he could play it with Gu Jinglian, Xiao Bao felt that it was a lot of fun. He really enjoyed the time he spent with Gu Jinglian. No matter how boring the game was, he still found it interesting. Gu Jinglian said calmly, "No." "Why?" Xiao Bao was greatly disappointed. He shrugged his head and said pitifully, "Why don't you play?" Dad has something to do. Oh, Xiaobao knew how to read people's expressions and was very tactful. Hence, he muttered, then I'll look for Uncle Fu to play. As he said this, he stood up and ran to look for Uncle Fu with a bowl of rose pastries in his hand. Gu Jinglian suddenly stood up and walked slowly to the desk. Suddenly, he thought of something and quietly pulled open the drawer. In the drawer, there was a red marriage certificate on top of a pile of account books. The 3 words stamped in gold on it were so eye-catching. Gu Jinglian sat down on the chair and casually picked up the marriage certificate. He gently flipped it open and a photo of him and Chu Ho came into view. In the photo, he was holding Chu Ho's shoulder and looking at the camera. His face was cold and his dark eyes were deep and unfathomable. So, this was how he looked in other people's eyes. Gu Jinglian subconsciously reached out and touched his face. He was a little surprised. He rarely looked at himself in the mirror, so from the photo, one could clearly see that his calm face was actually so cold. No wonder Xiao Bao kept avoiding him when they were in the Gu family. He seemed to be very afraid of him. Beside him, Chu Ho was clearly caught off guard when he was suddenly pulled to his side. However, he had to cooperate and smile, but his smile was very awkward. He smiled awkwardly. She was even a little reluctant. Unwilling or unwilling. Gu Jinglian could not help but narrow his eyes. His gaze fell on Chu Ho's awkward face in the photo, and he felt inexplicably unhappy. He was so engrossed that he did not notice the footsteps outside the door. Chu Ho had just pushed the door open when he saw Gu Jinglian holding the marriage certificate and staring at it. His lips could not help but twitch a few times. The marriage certificate is so beautiful. Before he finished speaking, the man who was engrossed in his thoughts was immediately alerted. Gu Jinglian instinctively closed the marriage certificate and threw it into the drawer. He looked at Chu Ho and frowned as he questioned, "Who let you in?" He meant, "Why didn't you knock before coming in?" Chu Ho crossed her arms and gestured at the half-closed door. The door wasn't closed. I thought there was no one inside. Gu Jinglian was speechless. Chu Ho saw that he was a little unhappy that he had been caught red-handed and thought it was funny. "I saw you staring at the marriage certificate the moment I came in." "Why? What's so beautiful on it?" As she spoke, she leaned over to see if there was any difference between his marriage certificate and hers. Gu Jinglian pushed the drawer to block her probing gaze. Chapter 3489. Chu Ho frowned. "What are you doing? Guarding against thieves? Where's your marriage certificate?" Gu Jinglian looked up and suddenly asked, "Take it out." "Why?" She stared at him warily. However, when he mentioned the marriage certificate, she suddenly remembered. She touched her pocket and realized that the marriage certificate seemed to have been kept in the drawer in the office and she had forgotten to bring it back. She blinked awkwardly. When Gu Jinglian saw this, he couldn't help but feel suspicious. "Where's the marriage certificate?" "I forgot." "You forgot?" How could she forget such an important thing? Chu Ho explained, "I think it's in the drawer in the office. I forgot to take it." Gu Jinglian was speechless. His face darkened, and he was obviously unhappy. Chu Ho touched the back of her head and said nonchalantly, "Anyway, it's not something important." "What do you want it for?" "Something not important?" Gu Jinglian repeated her words and his face darkened. He suddenly got up and approached her. The displeasure in his eyes was almost obvious. Chu Ho retreated slightly until her back was against the wall. She had nowhere else to go. She looked at Gu Jinglian warily and continued, "Could it be something important?" "Anyway, it's in the drawer. No one will steal it." Gu Jinglian stared at her unkindly. After a long time, he curved his lips coldly and smiled coldly. "Not important?" "Important." If Chu Ho still couldn't read his expression, she would have wasted all her years as a police officer. However, she couldn't understand. She had just left a marriage certificate behind. Why did he look so unhappy? She really couldn't think of what was so important about a marriage certificate. Gu Jinglian looked at her and said coldly, what are your thoughts on marrying me? This was a primary school student's summer homework. What was the point of writing down her thoughts after watching a movie? The only thought she had was, so troublesome. As soon as she said that, Gu Jinglian's expression became even colder. Trouble? I thought that getting a marriage certificate should be a very simple procedure. I didn't expect it to be so troublesome and take up so much of my time. Chu Ho grumbled unhappily, you made me so late this afternoon. I guess I'm going to lose my perfect attendance award this month. The coldness in Gu Jinglian's eyes seemed to stab her. Chu Ho felt that something was amiss and asked suspiciously, Gu Jinglian, what's wrong with you? You look like you want to eat someone. Gu Jinglian looked at her for a long time, then suddenly snorted and left. Chu Ho stared speechlessly at his back. After a long while, he grumbled, what's wrong with him? You're crazy. During dinner. For some reason, Xiao Bao was in a particularly good mood. Perhaps it was because he had finally gotten rid of one of his worries, so much so that his appetite became vigorous. He finished 2 bowls of rice in one go. Chu Ho glanced at him and saw him raise his bowl to Uncle Fu and say cheerfully, another bowl. You're not allowed to eat anymore. Chu Ho quickly said, you've already eaten 2 bowls today. If he ate any more, his little stomach would burst. Xiao Bao pursed his lips, feeling wronged. Uncle Fu also said, Xiao Bao, be good. Let's call it a day. Overeating was not good for a child's development. Uncle Fu also had his own concerns. Xiao Bao then put down his bowl and turned his head. Seeing that Gu Jinglian had also finished eating, he immediately asked, Dad, have you finished eating too? Gu Jinglian did not say anything. Chapter 3490. He thought to herself, don't tell me he's still angry? Although she didn't know what he was angry about. This man had always been unpredictable. For some reason, Xiao Bao was especially enthusiastic. His eyes darted around and he said, it's getting late. Daddy, hurry up and take a shower. Let's go to bed early. Chu Ho reminded him kindly, Xiao Bao, it's only 6:30. It's getting late. Gu Jinglian glanced at him and threw the bowl and chopsticks on the table. Then he got up and went upstairs. Seeing that he had succeeded, Xiao Bao turned to Chu Ho and encouraged her, Mommy, it's getting late. You should go to bed early too. Chu Ho was speechless. It was only 6:30. She couldn't fall asleep so early, right? However, Chu Ho had no choice but to stand up and head upstairs after being urged by Xiao Bao. Xiao Bao immediately followed behind and saw that Chu Ho was carrying a blanket and was about to enter Xiao Bao's room. He rushed over and blocked the door, saying righteously, you're not allowed to enter. Chu Ho rolled her eyes. What are you doing? Mommy, you seem to have forgotten what Xiao Bao said? Xiao Bao cleared his throat and said seriously, Xiao Bao said that he wants to sleep alone. This is independence. Mommy, please respect Xiao Bao. Respect, Chu Ho almost bit her tongue. Whoa. This was incredible. After attending kindergarten, this guy actually knew what respect was? If I don't sleep here, where should I sleep? Xiao Bao rolled his eyes as well. Mommy, you have a husband now. Of course, you should sleep with your husband. I've seen other people's parents sleeping together at night. Chu Ho said. Why are you so enthusiastic about asking me to sleep with your father? What are you up to? I don't care. Anyway, I don't want my mother to sleep with me. After Xiao Bao finished speaking, he slammed the door shut, leaving Chu Ho alone outside. Xiao Bao. Chu Ho kicked the door angrily. I'll give you 3 seconds to open the door. 2. Before he could finish counting, he heard a click. The door was locked from the inside. Chu Ho, was this brat asking for a beating? There was a stalemate outside the door for a few minutes. No matter how Chu Ho tried to persuade or coerce him, Xiao Bao still had no intention of opening the door. Left with no choice, Chu Ho hugged her quilt and walked to Gu Jinglian's door. Seeing that the door was ajar, she peeked through the crack and saw a dark shadow appear at the door. The door was pulled open from within. Gu Jinglian stood at the door in a bathrobe and looked at her coldly. Their eyes met. It was extremely awkward. Chu Ho sat up awkwardly and hugged her quilt. Embarrassed, she said, "Tonight I'll have to sleep on your sofa." She didn't dare to look at Gu Jinglian's expression. She thought that in the next second, some demon king would slam the door again and lock her outside. However, Gu Jinglian walked away expressionlessly, leaving the door open. Chu Ho walked in with her quilt and saw that the man had returned to the sofa. He was fiddling with his hair. He had just taken a shower and his hair was still wet. However, he didn't have the habit of using a hairdryer, so he waited for his hair to dry naturally. Taking advantage of this time, he had the habit of reading. Only then did he realize that his entire wall was filled with books. Generally speaking, some people's books were just empty shells used for decoration. Chapter 3491. She did not expect him to like reading. Gu Jinglian seemed to have noticed that she was constantly looking at him and could not help but look up suspiciously. She immediately reacted and retreated to the side. She walked into the cloakroom and started to look for her pajamas. After taking the pajamas, she walked into the bathroom and locked the door. She did not have the habit of locking the door, but since they were sharing a room, she decided to be on the safe side and lock the door from the inside. When she walked out of the bathroom feeling refreshed, Chu Ho had just walked into the study room. She planned to continue sleeping on the sofa for the night and settle the score with that fellow tomorrow. However, she saw Gu Jinglian leaning lazily on the sofa with his arms crossed and his eyes closed. She did not know if he was closing his eyes to take a nap or if he had already fallen asleep. He actually took over her territory. What happened to her sleeping on the sofa? How could he take it for himself just like that? The corners of Chu Ho's lips twitched. She walked in front of him and bent down to size him up. Gu Jinglian, she raised her voice again. Gu Jinglian? Chu Ho stood up speechlessly. It turned out that he had really fallen asleep. However, this man had always been alert. No matter how she called him, he did not wake up. He slept like a dead pig. Could he be pretending to be asleep? Chu Ho reached out and snapped her fingers a few times in front of him. However, Gu Jinglian still had his eyes closed and did not react at all. His long eyelashes intertwined quietly. When he closed his eyes, his long eyelashes were immediately obvious. He was actually charming and attractive. He was like a living portrait of a beauty. Chu Ho touched her chin and narrowed her eyes to size him up. Gu Jinglian's facial features were definitely top-notch. However, Chu Ho was not born to be in love. She was also not a member of the Appearance Association. Even if Gu Jinglian had his eyes closed, no matter how shockingly handsome he was, it could not move her at all. She did not even feel a ripple in her heart. She was somewhat face-blind. To be precise, no matter how good Gu Jinglian looked, he was about the same level as Li Xiaofeng. Looking at his sleeping face, Chu Ho only had one thought: his eyelashes were really long. Forget it. If you want to sleep on the sofa, I'll give it to you, okay? Chu Ho muttered to himself. He tossed the quilt over him and turned to walk into the bedroom. Lying on the spacious bed, Chu Ho stretched his limbs, feeling extremely satisfied. God, this bed is too comfortable, right? It was softer than the bed in Xiao Bao's room. Gu Jinglian's bed was made of high-quality Simmons mattresses with a full set of memory cotton bedding. The feeling of lying on it was neither soft nor hard. The softness was just right, wrapping around the entire line of his back. It was incomparably fitting. After lying down, he was reluctant to move. Chu Ho stretched out his 10 fingers in satisfaction. She hugged the pillow to her chest, closed her eyes, and soon fell asleep. Although she was a light sleeper, she could fall asleep very quickly. It could be said that she had a rather strange physique. Gu Jinglian once commented that sometimes she was as smart as a god, but sometimes she was simple-minded. In just a few minutes, she fell asleep soundly. In the study, a night light was on. On the sofa, the man suddenly opened his deep eyes. Gu Jinglian opened his eyes and saw that the wall lamp in the bedroom was still on. He suddenly got up. Chapter 3492. Speaking of this, Gu Jinglian was especially displeased. This woman had always avoided his bed as if she found it dirty and avoided him like a snake or a scorpion. Was he a scourge or a ferocious beast? Gu Jinglian walked into the bedroom and saw Chu Ho hugging a pillow under the dim light, dominating more than half of the space. This bed was specially custom-made. It was 3 meters wide and 3 meters long. Even such a big bed did not look big enough for her to toss and turn. This woman's sleeping posture was terrible. He gave such an evaluation, walked to the head of the bed, and slowly sat down on his side. The soft bed sank in an instant. Gu Jinglian lowered his head and looked at Chu Ho's sleeping face. His eyes could not help but darken a little. She was wearing pajamas. Because her sleeping posture was too casual, her slender legs were exposed to the air. Her snow-white skin looked like jade porcelain under the wall lamp. Her eyes were tightly shut. On her fair and flawless skin, her eyelashes were black, and her lips were red. Her black hair was scattered on the pillow, but there was a kind of magnificent beauty. She used to be so thin that her cheeks were slightly sunken. However, Uncle Fu had been taking good care of her recently. He fed her fish and meat, and she had finally put on some weight. Her palm-sized face was not as thin as before, and she looked haggard. However, his gaze fell on the distinct joints of her collarbone. It was too deep. This meant that she was still a little too thin with her current appearance. Chu Ho closed her eyes quietly and let out soft breathing sounds that were almost inaudible. She slept peacefully, so her beauty at that time could be seen without any hindrance. Gu Jinglian's eyes could not help but darken a little. His body actually reacted a little. How long had it been since he had a woman? Looking at her like this, it was as if some kind of consciousness was quietly awakening. Gu Jinglian could not help but reach out and gently push the hair hanging on her neck to the side. When his cold fingertips touched her skin, Chu Ho shuddered and suddenly opened her eyes. She had just opened her eyes and met his deep almond-shaped eyes. Because of this, her originally hazy consciousness was suddenly awakened. "You. What are you doing?" Before she could finish speaking, Gu Jinglian leaned down. His tall body followed his movements and covered her under his dark shadow. Chu Ho was so frightened that her tongue was almost tied. Even her breathing was not smooth. "Gu Jinglian, what are you doing?" "Sleeping." His cold words made Chu Ho turn pale with shock. You're not sleeping on the sofa?" "Did I say that I'll sleep on the sofa?" he retorted, silencing the woman. He did not say that. However, just now Chu Ho squinted her eyes suspiciously. "Were you pretending to be asleep just now?" When he should be smart, he was not smart. When he should not be smart, he was very smart. Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. "Since we're husband and wife, what's wrong with sleeping on the same bed?" "Husband and wife?" Chu Ho sneered. "We've just registered our marriage. Does that make us husband and wife? Does it not?" Chu Ho flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Gu Jinglian, don't forget. Why did we register our marriage?" "You don't have to remind me." Chapter 3493. Gu Jinglian moved closer to her. His tall nose was almost touching her cheek. His hot breath kept brushing against her skin. His calm and masculine breathing was audible to her ears. Chu Ho was speechless. What are you trying to do? You really don't know, or are you pretending not to know?" Gu Jinglian's long fingers gently brushed against her lips. His eyes sparkled. "Of course, I'm fulfilling my duty as a husband." Chu Ho was thankful that there was no water in her mouth. Otherwise, she would have spat it out. "Duty?" She mumbled, "What duty do you have to fulfill?" Before she could finish her sentence, Gu Jinglian suddenly lowered his head and covered her slightly open mouth with his slightly cold lips. Almost without any hesitation, he broke through the barrier between her lips and teeth. Chu Ho widened her eyes in shock. He suddenly kissed her, leaving her no room to react. What was he doing? He was actually kissing her. Gu Jinglian, who had always been obsessed with cleanliness, was actually kissing her on the lips. In such a state of shock, she did not react immediately until she felt the warmth of his palm on her back. Chu Ho pushed him away fiercely. However, just as she pushed his body away, Gu Jinglian continued to press down on her. It was as if he had already expected her resistance. Before Chu Ho could punch his face, he quickly held her back with one hand. Chu Ho was instantly embarrassed and angry. She struggled, but he held her down so tightly that she had no room to resist. Let go. She shouted angrily and bent her knees to hit his vital parts. Gu Jinglian did not care about her tricks at all and used his legs to suppress her. In this way, she had no room to struggle at all. Gu Jinglian, she gritted her teeth, and her eyes were filled with hatred and anger. Gu Jinglian said slowly, "It seems that you didn't suffer enough 6 years ago." Suffer? Chu Ho furrowed his brows and glared at her. Gu Jinglian smirked coldly and whispered into her ear, "You're no match for me in terms of skills." His breath was like orchids, and when his breath brushed against her ear, she couldn't help but become extremely sensitive. She shivered, and all the pores on her body opened up. "Gu Jinglian, I'm warning you. If you dare to touch me today," the man interrupted her. "You should know me." Chu Ho stared at him suspiciously. However, she heard him say word by word, "I hate this kind of provocation the most." After saying that, he lowered his body. He was only one step away from conquering the city. Chu Ho resisted fiercely, but he couldn't break free from his powerful grip. Gu Jinglian said, "Didn't we do it once 6 years ago? You don't have to be so pretentious." Before Chu Ho could say anything, he felt a strange sensation and broke out in cold sweat. When the first ray of morning light shone in, Chu Ho was awakened by the glaring rays of the morning sun. She frowned and woke up. She opened her eyes and regained consciousness. Immediately, she felt the pain in her body clearly transmitted through her nerve endings. She had always been sensitive to pain, but her pain threshold was very high. She had once suffered a serious injury and a bullet pierced through her arm, but she still relied on her willpower to walk through the tropical rainforest. However, the pain in her body now was not like the injuries she had suffered in the past. Chapter 3494. Everything that had happened last night was more like a smoke-filled war. She struggled to prop herself up and get off the bed. The moment her toes touched the ground, the pain on her thighs became more obvious. This damned man, Chu Ho cursed viciously in her heart. When she walked into the bathroom earlier, her body was reflected in the mirror. Her pajamas were torn apart and her shoulders drooped. Her originally fair and smooth skin was mottled with many densely packed bite marks. They were not hickeys, but bite marks. They looked like the marks left by poisonous insects and were extremely messy. Other than the bite marks, there were also some bruises. These were the marks left behind by her resistance. Gu Jinglian had tamed her as if she was a proud and aloof lion. Even though she kept resisting, she had to admit that compared to Gu Jinglian's skills, she was really vulnerable. Who would have thought that such a secretive man would be able to suppress her so easily with just one hand? Chu Ho unwillingly changed out of her pajamas and endured the pain. She took a hot shower, changed her clothes, and walked out of the door. However, she unexpectedly bumped into Uncle Fu, who was passing by. "Chu Ho, morning." Before the word, "ah," could leave his mouth, Uncle Fu saw that there was an extremely ambiguous mark on her exposed neck. It was red and mottled, and it immediately made his imagination run wild. He thought about how she and Gu Jinglian were in the same room last night, and then he thought about how Old Master also had an eye-catching red mark on his neck when he went out this morning. Even though he did not dare to take a closer look, it was not difficult to imagine how this mark was left behind. When Uncle Fu thought about how Old Master had conquered Chu Ho last night, the joy in his heart almost burst out from his eyes. He resisted the urge to cheer and pretended to be reserved. "You're awake." Do you want to eat breakfast? Chu Ho saw that although he was pretending to be calm, his eyes kept glancing at her neck. She instinctively reacted. Could there be some strange mark on the part of her neck that was not covered by her clothes? She immediately covered it with her hands, but it was a little too obvious. Uncle Fu almost could not hold back his laughter. He wanted to hold it in, but the corners of his mouth were raised to the sky. Xiao Bao is awake and eating breakfast. Where's Gu Jinglian? Chu Ho could not restrain her anger as she clenched her fists and said angrily, where is he? Old master, went out early in the morning. Cow. Chu Ho could not help but curse. She was embarrassed and angry, like a volcano that was about to erupt. Uncle Fu kindly and reminded her, you're eating breakfast? I heard your stomach grumble a few times. Are you hungry? She must have exhausted all her energy from last night's torment. Now that she woke up late, she must be starving. She could not help but glared at him. Uncle Fu. Yes. What are you gloating about? She questioned him angrily, what do you mean? Uncle Fu immediately said sternly, is that so? I'm not gloating. How could he say that he was not gloating? The corners of his mouth were raised so high that a soy sauce bottle could be hung from it. Uncle Fu chuckled and said, hurry up and come down for breakfast. However, this old man disappeared from her sight within 3 seconds. Chapter 3495. Chu Ho asked, what are you guys whispering about? Xiao Bao immediately sat up straight and tried to hold back his laughter. Uncle Fu immediately stood to the side and didn't say anything. Chu Ho walked over and glanced at them warily. Then she walked to the dining table and casually took a sandwich and milk. She said, I'm going to work. It's getting late. Don't be late for school. With that, Chu Ho left. Just as she left, Xiao Bao stood up excitedly and said to Uncle Fu, really? Of course it's true. Uncle Fu said happily, who knows, maybe your mom will give birth to a little brother for you soon. When Xiao Bao heard this, he didn't feel too good about it. Uncle Fu looked at his expression and saw that he was reluctant. He was a little surprised and asked, what's wrong? Xiao Bao, aren't you happy that mom is giving you a little brother? Xiao Bao said unhappily, I want a little sister. A little sister? Uncle Fu was a little surprised. Wouldn't it be great to have a little brother? That way, he can play with you. I want a little sister who's as cute as Xiao Bao pouted and said, a little sister would be so cute. When Uncle Fu heard this, he said, it doesn't matter if it's a little brother or a little sister, I'll like them both. Of course. Xiao Bao added, as long as it's from mom and dad, it doesn't matter if it's a little sister or a little brother. In the future, I'll be an older brother. Just as Uncle Fu and Xiao Bao were immersed in the beautiful yearning of a little brother and a little sister, before going to work, Chu Ho went to the pharmacy to buy a morning after pill. She drank the bottle of purified water that she had bought. After doing some calculations, Chu was still worried even though it was the safe period. This damned guy, did he take the wrong medicine last night and lose his mind? Chu Ho had just arrived at the police station and was sitting in his seat when he suddenly thought of something. He pulled open the drawer and saw that the marriage certificate was still lying in the drawer. He closed the drawer again. In the afternoon, she received orders from her superiors to go out on a mission and capture a criminal. Just as the criminal was escorted to the interrogation room, he suddenly received a call from Meng Qingxue. Chu Ho, are you free tonight? We haven't seen each other for a long time. How have you been? Hearing Meng Qingxue's voice, Chu Ho couldn't help but smile. Okay, I'm at work now. I'll probably be free after 6:00. Well, then, where do you work? I'll pick you up. You came to pick me up? Chu Ho smiled, but he did not refuse and told him the address. At 6:00 in the evening, Meng Qingxue stood at the entrance of the police station in a daze. She looked at Chu Ho, who had changed into casual clothes and was walking out. She could not react for a moment and her gaze was fixed on him. She had actually joined the anti-gang team? If she remembered correctly, wasn't Xiao Bao's biological father Gu Jinglian from the Gu family? His father was in charge of the gang and his mother was in charge of the anti-gang team. Wasn't this too extreme? Chu Ho was overjoyed to see her. He walked forward and hugged her gently. The two of them had not met for a long time and missed each other dearly. After she had settled down in the Gu family, she had no choice but to go out at first. Meng Qingxue had contacted her through Uncle Fu, but Chu Ho did not have permission to go out, so they could not meet. Chapter 3496. As he had to take care of the children and the Mu group's crisis during that period of time, it was difficult for him to find the time to go out with her. He was also worried about her going out alone. Seeing that Meng Qingxue had driven here, Chu Ho was a little surprised. "You've gotten your driver's license?" "Long ago." Meng Qingxue said, "It's been a long time since we last met. I've been thinking about you. Since I'm free today, let me treat you to Western food. It doesn't matter what we eat. I'm not picky." The two of them arrived at the Western restaurant. Meng Qingxue had booked a private room early in the morning and only then did they take their seats. Meng Qingxue suddenly took out a stack of envelopes from her bag and handed them to her. "This is, have you forgotten?" Meng Qingxue laughed. "During our time in Yen City, I've been staying at your place and eating your food. It's a total of more than 20,000 yuan, not a cent more or less." Chu Ho could not help but feel a little touched. It was rare that she still remembered this. Chu Ho opened the envelope. There was a total of 25,000 yuan in it. She did not refuse and accepted it. Meng Qingxue started chatting about the recent situation. Ever since Song Enya's incident, the Muse and the Songs had cut ties. Since then, because of the company's affairs, Mu Linfeng fell seriously ill and was bedridden. Since then, Mu Yanqing had officially taken over the Mu group. Although Mu Yanqing was not as good as Mu Yaja in this aspect, he was still from the Muse. Although he was not as outstanding as Mu Yaja, he still managed the company well. Mu Yanqing was not confident, but Meng Qingxue had been quietly by his side, encouraging him. In order to fight for his dignity, Mu Yanqing was determined to make a name for himself. Although the Mu group was not as good as before, it still faced many crises during this period of time. Its capital chain was broken, and shareholders kept withdrawing their shares. At one point, it was in danger. Now, the Mu group was at least standing firm. Although it was not as good as before, and there were still many people who were pessimistic about it, Mu Yanqing devoted himself to his career and maintained the Mu group's original state. This was already very difficult. After 10 months of pregnancy, Meng Qingxue gave birth to an adorable son for Mu Yanqing. Her son looked more like her. He had delicate features and fair skin. He was very cute. Mu Yanqing named him Mu Wenqi. Meng Qingxue showed Chu Ho a full moon photo. After becoming a mother, Meng Qingxue's greatest joy every day was being with her baby. She wasn't the kind of person who especially liked to show off her baby in her circle of friends. She just felt that it was cute and took pictures of it herself. She even saved it on her phone. At this moment, the little guy was still young, but he had already learned how to walk. Unexpectedly, after the two of them parted, in the blink of an eye, the little guy who had been obediently staying in her stomach had already learned how to walk. Chu Ho could not help but feel deeply moved. Meng Qingxue added, "I've always been thinking about Xiao Bao." However, she had just given birth and her body was weak. Now that she has recovered a little, the child cannot be separated from her. Otherwise, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. Chu Ho paused for a moment and suddenly asked with concern, "How about now? Are you okay?" "Yes." "How does Mu Yanqing treat you?" Chu Ho's face suddenly darkened. "Is he still like before?" Chapter 3497. He still remembered that after Mu Yanqing and Song Enya's wedding banquet was messed up by Gu Jinglian, Mu Yanqing was unexpectedly much more relaxed. When he mentioned Meng Qingxue's marriage to Mu Linfeng again, Mu Linfeng surprisingly did not reject it. Perhaps, other than Mu Yanqing, he could not count on anyone else in the Mu family. Mu Linfeng was hoping that the Mu Group's century-old foundation would not be destroyed in his hands overnight. Hence, when Mu Yanqing proposed to marry Meng Qingxue, Old Master Mu did not object. Mu Yanqing and Meng Qingxue collected their marriage certificate and held a special wedding banquet. They did not invite any guests. In the church, other than some important elders of the Mu family and some devout believers, there was no one else. They took their vows in front of the priest. When it was time to exchange rings, Meng Qingxue carefully put the ring on his ring finger. The two of them looked at each other and their eyes reddened. Mu Yanqing knew very well how hard it was to come by such happiness. Along the way, if the two of them had given up easily, perhaps they would not be where they were today. Meng Qingxue was also filled with emotions. She had been waiting for him for so many years. Finally, she got what she wanted and married the person she loved. When Mu Yanqing put the ring on her finger, tears welled up in her eyes. She cried and laughed at the same time. She was so happy that she looked a little embarrassed. She said to him, "Whether you're Mu Yanqing of the Mu Group or the Mu Yanqing who has left the Mu Group, you'll always be my husband, Mu Yanqing." Mu Yanqing's eyes reddened when he heard this. The two of them hugged each other tightly. After they got married in the church, they flew to various countries to travel and get married. Although there was no grand wedding, Meng Qingxue had nothing else to ask for as long as she could be with him. Although he was busy with the Mu Group's business, he was never stingy with spending time with her during the pregnancy. On the day of labor, he received the news and rushed to the hospital from the company. He put on a sterile gown and entered the delivery room. Just as he entered the delivery room, the child was born. It was a son. To Mu Yanqing, whether it was a son or a daughter, he would like them both. This was their first child. In the future, they might have a second one. However, this child came with twists and turns, and almost died prematurely. Mu Yanqing's heart was filled with countless emotions as he held the child in his arms. After giving birth to the child, Mu Yanqing bought a villa and registered it under Meng Qingxue's name as compensation for the hardships she went through during her pregnancy. This was also his promise to her. Meng Qingxue did not care about these things, but Mu Yanqing said, "This house will be our home in the future. No matter what, this will always be your harbor." After having a child, Mu Yanqing's careerism was stimulated. No matter what, Mu Yanqing would still spare a day every weekend to accompany him. After the breastfeeding period, Meng Qingxue wanted to find a job, but Mu Yanqing did not allow it. Firstly, although the child had passed the breastfeeding period, he still needed someone to take care of him. Although she had hired a nanny, she was not as close as a mother. Secondly, even if Meng Qingxue worked, the few thousand yuan she earned a month could not compare to the money he earned in the blink of an eye. He would work hard to manage his career and give her something to rely on. However, with the arrival of the child, his concept of family was awakened. Therefore, to him, family became more important than his career. Chapter 3498. He said, "When I was young, my parents were busy with their careers and didn't have time to accompany me. I don't want my son to have the same childhood as me. You don't have to think about work. Raising you and our son is my career. Your career is to take care of the family." Meng Qingxue was touched. Mu Yanqing was not good at expressing himself, but she understood what he wanted to express. He pitied her and did not want her to work hard. He was already very busy with work, so he hoped that she could take his place and spend more time with their son. Although the two of them would occasionally bicker, even their daily bickering was filled with happiness. Perhaps, life was like this, and happiness was so simple. A family of three, 2 people in one house, 3 meals, 4 seasons. It was plain, but warm. What about you? Meng Qingxue probed, "Have you accepted Gu Jing?" "Mr. Gu?" She was afraid of Gu Jinglian from the bottom of her heart and had never dared to call him by his name. Chu Ho's face stiffened slightly. At the mention of Gu Jinglian, she thought of what happened last night and said unhappily, "Why are you mentioning him?" With that, she sucked on her straw with a cold face. Sizzle, the atmosphere was very cold. Meng Qingxue's lips twitched and she smiled awkwardly. I saw that you were staying with the Gu family and thought, that's because Xiao Bao wants a father. Chu Ho said coldly, it has nothing to do with me. With that, she rested her chin on her hand and sucked on her straw again. Sizzle, Meng Qingxue held her coffee cup and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Did the two of you quarrel? No. Then, Meng Qingxue suddenly said meaningfully, I heard that the two of you are already married. Chu Ho was a little surprised. How did you know? Meng Qingxue opened WeChat and clicked on her conversation with Xiao Bao. Chu Ho took a look and was stunned. Auntie Qingxue, Mommy and Daddy have already registered their marriage. Xiao Bao is so happy. It showed that it was sent at 7:00 last night. Chu Ho was petrified. This guy, he actually leaked the news. Meng Qingxue laughed and said, since you're already married, why are you still insisting that it has nothing to do with you? I heard from Yanqing that Gu Jinglian is quite a formidable person. He's swift and decisive. When I told him about your marriage, he was shocked. Why? That's because I don't believe that a man like him would marry a woman. After a pause, Meng Qingxue continued, he doesn't believe in marriage. He said that he won't get married. Chu Ho was a little surprised. Is that so? Meng Qingxue asked curiously, so, how did you get married? He suggested it. Meng Qingxue was stunned. Huh? To be precise. Chu Ho sneered. He begged me. Meng Qingxue, she could not help but imagine Gu Jinglian kneeling on the ground, hugging Chu Ho's thigh pitifully and begging for marriage. Pfft. She was amused by her own imagination. Chu Ho said unhappily, what are you laughing at? I didn't expect the rumored Master Gu to beg a woman to marry him. If you hadn't said it yourself, I wouldn't have believed it. Chapter 3499. Xiao Bao didn't have a father since he was young, so he was ostracized by many children of his age. It's only natural that he felt insecure. Meng Qingxue paused for a moment and said, but for a child, a marriage certificate is not the only thing that can give him a sense of security. A harmonious family is the most important thing. Chu Ho said calmly, it's a pity that I don't have any feelings for Gu Jinglian, and he doesn't feel the same for me either. So, you and CEO Gu are planning to keep up the act? Meng Qingxue couldn't help but laugh. When the child grows up, this matter won't be able to be hidden anymore. Chu Ho asked, what else can I do? Do you want me to make the act real? Chu Ho, there's something I've always wanted to ask you. Meng Qingxue suddenly asked, how did you get Xiao Bao in the first place? This kind of thing is consensual. If he really forced you, with your character and skills, you might not be able to force him. Don't tell me you really don't have any feelings for CEO Gu? Chu Ho furrowed his eyebrows, and a complicated expression appeared on his face. She sucked on the straw absent-mindedly. Her teeth squeezed the straw until it was deformed. Her mind was in a mess. For her, the memories before she lost her memory were not that deep. She was also very curious as to why something like that happened between her and Gu Jinglian. Was it because she couldn't help it, or because she was forced? If she was really forced, with her strong character, Gu Jinglian might not have succeeded. But if she was willing, how could she be moved by a man as fickle as Gu Jinglian? Although she had regained her memories before she lost her memory, to her, it was like she had gained some ordinary memories. Therefore, she couldn't tell what kind of feelings she had for Gu Jinglian at that time. Chu Ho, I think you might have had feelings for President Gu back then. Maybe you couldn't help it. What about Xiao Bao? Chu Ho didn't say anything else. He seemed to be avoiding the topic on purpose. He smiled at Meng Qingxue and said, let's eat. I'm starving. With that, she began to cut the steak. Meng Qingxue saw that she deliberately avoided the topic and knew that she must be confused now, so she did not mention it again. When Chu Ho got home, he bumped into Uncle Fu in the living room. Uncle Fu immediately came up to her and said excitedly, in a few days, it will be Xiao Bao's birthday. Chu Ho, do you have any ideas? Xiao Bao had said that he would invite all the children in the class to celebrate his birthday at the Gu residence. Old Master was afraid of noise, so he didn't allow it. At this moment, the father and son were in a deadlock. Do you want to persuade them? Chu Ho turned to look at Uncle Fu with a complicated expression. Suddenly, he said tentatively, Uncle Fu, yes? She opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but hesitated. In fact, she wanted to ask him how she felt about Gu Jinglian in the past. Did she like him? Or did she hate him? If she hated him, then why did she and Gu Jinglian have that kind of thing happened? But if she really did like him, why did she forget about those feelings in her life? Chu Ho felt extremely confused about the current situation. She didn't know how to face Gu Jinglian. As for Xiao Bao's vision of a harmonious family of 3, she didn't know what to do. It wasn't that she didn't want to. It was just that she was really indifferent when it came to matters of the heart. Chapter 3500. She had also become dismissive of matters of the heart. She felt that feelings were dispensable. Even if she was alone, she could still lead a good life. However, ever since she had Xiao Bao, she had another concern in her heart. At the same time, she also valued her responsibilities as a mother. However, no matter what Xiao Bao wanted, she was willing to give it her all. Yet, it was difficult for her to fulfill his dreams. Getting the marriage certificate with Gu Jinglian was just an act. Could it be that she had to make the act real for Xiao Bao and force herself to do so? Uncle Fu saw that she wanted to say something but was hesitating. He couldn't help but laugh and say, "You seem to have something to ask me." When Chu Ho heard this, she plucked up her courage and turned around to ask Uncle Fu, "What do you think my attitude towards Gu Jinglian was when I was in the Gu family?" Uncle Fu was stunned for a moment. Then he sighed slowly and said, "I can't make any judgments about what happened between you and Old Master. However, Chu Ho, you used to go by Old Master's side under the alias of Hong He. At that time, Old Master already knew your identity and you were his personal companion. You had countless opportunities to make a move on Old Master." After a pause, under Chu Ho's stunned gaze, Uncle Fu asked meaningfully, "Unfortunately, you didn't succeed from the beginning to the end and Old Master never exposed your identity. Don't you think that this is strange? As the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game more clearly. But as an onlooker, I can't say anything. It's just that when it comes to matters of the heart, it's better to let nature take its course." Just as Chu Ho was deep in thought, Uncle Fu suddenly said, "All these are not important. What's important is that Xiao Bao and Old Master are quarreling over the birthday venue. You should go and persuade them quickly and come up with some ideas at the same time." Chu Ho's face was full of black lines. When she walked into the study, she saw Xiao Bao sitting on the sofa angrily with his arms crossed, looking very angry. Gu Jinglian, on the other hand, was sitting calmly in front of his desk, holding a weasel brush and writing ink. Seeing that Chu Ho had come, Xiao Bao's angry face fell. He opened his arms and pounced on her. "Mom!" Sob, sob, sob. Gu Jinglian looked up and saw that she had returned. He ignored her as if she was invisible. Chu Ho picked up Xiao Bao, and the little guy poured out his grievances to her. "Isn't it my birthday this Sunday? I told Dad that I wanted to hold a birthday party at the Gu residence. We could save money and have fun. But Father didn't allow it. What should we do?" Chu Ho's lips twitched. "Save money?" "Yes, Dad said that he wanted to book the entire hotel, but I think it's too wasteful." Xiao Bao whispered in her ear, "I heard from Uncle Fu that it costs tens of thousands to book the entire hotel. It's so expensive. I was trying to save money for Dad, but he called me an idiot. He even said that the Gu residence is so big. If my little friends get lost, it'll be too troublesome to find them one by one." Chu Ho was speechless. That was true. The Gu residence was located in a place with good feng shui. Every inch of land was worth gold, but even so, the Gu residence was still very big. When she first entered the Gu residence, she got lost and couldn't find her way. She imagined that it would be troublesome if a large group of children were to run around the Gu residence and something happened to them. Furthermore, those powerful subordinates of the Gu residents all had ferocious looks on their faces. Would they really not scare those innocent and naive children? Chapter 35:01. Why don't you listen to Daddy and book the entire hotel? Chu Ho said. Gu Jinglian's brush suddenly paused. When the word father came out of her mouth, it gave him a strange feeling in his heart. For some reason, he felt warm. He had never felt such a feeling before. Chu Ho continued, Daddy is rich. Don't think about saving money for Daddy. Gu Jinglian was speechless. He looked up and his face immediately turned pale. Chu Ho glanced at him and said meaningfully, Daddy is so rich. If it's your birthday, you can spend it however extravagantly you want. Xiao Bao refused to comply. I want to spend it in my own home. As he said this, he turned around and looked at Gu Jinglian with a look of hesitation. Chu Ho had no choice but to say to Gu Jinglian, why don't we let him spend it in the Gu residence? Gu Jinglian said coldly, it's troublesome. He found it noisy. Xiao Bao alone was noisy enough. If there was a group of little kids, it would be so noisy that the entire house would be torn apart. Just thinking about that scene gave him a headache. Chu Ho put down Xiao Bao, walked in front of him and threw his brush aside. Gu Jinglian frowned, but heard her say, Gu Jinglian, this is Xiao Bao's first birthday in the Gu residence. Since he wants to spend it in the Gu residence, why don't you agree to it this time? He narrowed his eyes, but Chu Ho lost her patience and grabbed his collar. She smiled, but her tone was unfriendly. Say, okay. Gu Jinglian looked unhappy and his lips curled into a dangerous smile. Are you ordering me? How is this an order? I'm clearly discussing it with you. Chu Ho smiled and gritted her teeth. Hurry up and agree. Xiao Bao also rushed in front of him and leaned on the table. His watery eyes stared at him with a look of anticipation. Gu Jinglian, the mother and son were singing the same tune and had great chemistry. Gu Jinglian curled his lips impatiently and said, sure, but you'll be in charge. Chu Ho immediately agreed, okay. When Xiao Bao heard this, he immediately hugged Chu Ho excitedly and cheered, yay yay yay. Mom is the best. Mommy is the best. Gu Jinglian was a little angry. He was clearly the one who took a step back, yet this guy was hugging Chu Ho and cheering. What was the meaning of this? Xiao Bao sensed Gu Jinglian's dissatisfaction and knew how to read people's expressions. She immediately walked in front of him and threw herself into his arms. She hugged him and smiled contentedly. Thank you, Dad. Moi. Gu Jinglian pushed him away in disgust. Get lost. Just like that, this matter was settled. Xiao Bao's birthday happened to fall on the weekend, so all the children were able to attend. Chu Ho and Uncle Fu had already prepared in advance. However, the most troublesome problem for the birthday banquet at the Gu residence was, Chu Ho stood in front of all the men. Dozens of subordinates stood in a row and looked straight ahead. At the Gu residence, besides Gu Jinglian and Uncle Fu, there were the elders of the 4 main halls and their hired thugs. When the time came, if the children rushed in, then these people might not, it would be too scary. Chu Ho suddenly thought of an idea and told Uncle Fu about it. When Uncle Fu heard this, he was dumbfounded. Is this really okay? What else can we do? What if they scare the children with their fierce faces? Let them smile. Chu Ho said, they all have the face of a villain. Even if they smile, it's still very scary. Chapter 35:02. A group of men complained, Sister Chu, what do you mean by villainous face? We protest. That's right. You're attacking us personally. Chu Ho suddenly turned her head and glanced at them coldly. Everyone was so frightened that they kept quiet. Uncle Fu said helplessly, all right. We'll do as you say. When the men heard this, they immediately wailed and howled, no. We don't want to wear those clothes. A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. We might as well die if we wear those clothes. That's right. Sister Chu, it's so shameful to wear those clothes. We won't wear them even if we die. Chu Ho said slowly, all right. I'll satisfy you. A few minutes later, more than 10 men were lying on the ground in a mess. A few of them attacked together, wave after wave, but they were still defeated by Chu Ho alone. This woman, she's so scary. Chu Ho clapped her hands casually and said coldly, you can't even beat me, and you still have the nerve to call yourself a real man? It's settled then. Uncle Fu, buy the clothes and let them change into them. Uncle Fu looked at the corpses on the ground and his lips twitched violently. I got it. In the blink of an eye, it was Xiao Bao's birthday. Early in the morning, Xiao Bao climbed out of bed. In the past, he was famous for lazing in bed, but today was different. Today was his birthday. It was his first birthday in the Gu family. He was so excited that he couldn't sleep for the entire night. He woke up early in the morning. The little guy washed his face and brushed his teeth before running downstairs. When he reached the door, he was shocked by the strange scene in the courtyard and froze on the spot. At night, Uncle Fu spent the night decorating. In the courtyard, there were colorful hydrogen balloons tied to the trees. In the originally antique courtyard, there were colorful ribbons tied to the beams. A person wearing a Doraemon costume floated in front of him and said with a resentful voice, "Good morning, young master." On the other side, one of the men in charge of smashing was wearing Minnie's costume. He was holding a broom and cleaning the yard laboriously. Its ears were erect, it had a big head and a skinny body. It was very cute. However, it was hard to imagine that the person wrapped in the costume was a ferocious man. In the courtyard, the group of thugs had already changed their clothes in advance. Although they were unwilling, Uncle Fu threw the costume to them, and they obediently put it on. Chu Ho was worried that their fierce faces would scare the children, so he asked Uncle Fu to buy all kinds of doll costumes and instructed them to put them on. Thus, wherever he looked, he saw all kinds of men in cartoon costumes walking around. There were Mickey, Goofy, Donald Duck, and even Nick the Fox and Judy the Rabbit from Zootopia, which were his favorite animated movies. For a moment, he felt like he was in a fairy tale world. Xiao Bao's eyes lit up. He found it unbelievable. So cute. A complaint came from not far away. It's so stuffy. One of them had just taken off his headgear when Uncle Fu walked over and kicked him. Wear it. You're not allowed to take it off. That person had no choice but to wear the headgear obediently. So cute. So cute, so cute. Xiao Bao rushed over excitedly and hugged Judy the Rabbit from behind. Judy the Rabbit. It's a real Judy the Rabbit. And Bao. Kung Fu Panda. Chapter 3503. Xiao Bao yelled excitedly. The courtyard was filled with his favorite cartoon characters. He was like a little mouse that had fallen into a rice bowl. He was extremely happy. Early in the morning, Gu Jinglian was awakened by Xiao Bao's yelling downstairs. He opened his eyes and was still sleepy when he vaguely heard Xiao Bao's voice coming from outside the window. Wow! Bunny Judy, can you give me your autograph? I'm your little fan. I've watched your role in Zootopia many times. You're my idol. You're my idol. The corners of Gu Jinglian's eyebrows twitched violently. He was a little confused. He rolled out of bed, walked to the window, and opened the curtains. Through the window, he suddenly saw the courtyard full of cartoon characters walking around. His face darkened instantly. He saw that the burly and valiant subordinates of the Gu residents had been forced to change into all kinds of cartoon costumes and were walking around the courtyard. There were colorful hydrogen balloons on the trees, as well as colorful ribbons. Where was this? The Gu residence, which was usually cold and antique, had suddenly become half a fairy tale paradise. Gu Jinglian was speechless. He walked to the study and saw Chu Ho lying on the sofa. She was sleeping soundly with her arms behind her head. He kicked her awake. Chu Ho woke up with a start. She bounced up from the sofa and looked up to see Gu Jinglian's gloomy face. He was glaring at her with a pair of cold eyes, as if he was silently questioning her. What did you do? Chu Ho was instantly confused. It's so early in the morning. Why are you so angry? Just as she finished speaking, Xiao Bao's voice came from outside the window again. Goodbye. Can I hug you? Chu Ho rushed to the window and saw that Big White, who had been holding a broom and cleaning the yard with great effort, was suddenly pushed to the ground by Xiao Bao's bear. Big White was sprawled on the ground, its 2 arms and legs struggling, but it couldn't turn over no matter how hard it tried. Xiao Bao helped him up with much difficulty. He bent down to pick up the broom, but with his big belly, he couldn't even squat down. At a glance, he looked extremely adorable. It was hard to imagine that a fiendish man was wrapped inside Big White. Chu Ho turned around awkwardly and saw Gu Jinglian crossing his arms expressionlessly. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Were you the one who decorated the Gu residence like this?" Isn't it good?" Chu Ho smiled and said, "Look at how happy your son is." Gu Jinglian, it's a rare day. She added, "It'll be fine after the birthday party." Gu Jinglian snorted, "Childish." Childish? Isn't it good to be a little childish? Don't all children like childish things? Chu Ho paused and said meaningfully, "I also heard that someone liked the 7 Calabash brothers when they were young." Gu Jinglian's face darkened and he flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Who told you that?" "Humph, see, you admit it too. You even hugged Winnie the Pooh to sleep when you were young." One night, Uncle Fu was drunk and pulled her aside to tell her about Gu Jinglian's childhood. It was said that the 4-year-old Gu Jinglian was especially obsessed with cartoons. Chapter 3504. His grandson was the future successor of the Gu family. Becoming a police officer? How useless would that be? Uncle Fu also said that he still remembered that in one of the episodes of Black Cat Detective, there was a murder case in Zootopia. A male praying mantis died, and in the end, Black Cat Detective solved the case. It turned out that the 2 praying mantises got married, and the male praying mantis let the female praying mantis eat him so that she could give birth to his child. It turned out that the female praying mantis needed nutrition to give birth to baby mantises, so she ate the male praying mantis to maintain her nutrition. At night, Gu Jinglian was so scared that he hid under his blanket and swore that he would never get married. Uncle Fu explained to him several times that praying mantises were praying mantises, and humans were humans. His future wife would not eat him. Gu Jinglian finally believed him. This was not the stupidest thing. The stupidest thing was when he passed by a shop on the streets. At that time, Gu Jinglian, who was only 4 years old, saw that the shop sold bubble machines. They looked like pistols, and when the trigger was pulled, many bubbles would be blown out. At that time, it was very novel and sold very expensive, but many children liked it. He took a fancy to it and said that he wanted it. Uncle Fu did not agree, so Gu Jinglian crossed his arms and sat on the ground with his legs crossed. His face was sullen and he did not say a word. This child was stubborn, but he did not cry or make a fuss. However, he did not say much either. He had an expression that said, "If you don't buy it for me, I won't leave." Uncle Fu was not willing to indulge him, so he pretended to leave. However, after walking far away from the shop, this guy still did not follow him. He turned back curiously, but saw that the guy was still lying on the ground and refused to get up. The shop owner could not stand it anymore. She took a bunch of bubble machines and handed them to him, saying, "Here, stop fooling around. I'll give them to you to play with, okay?" She also thought that Gu Jinglian was too cute. He was pink and had a cute face. When he got angry, his cheeks puffed up like a bun. However, Gu Jinglian did not want it. He wanted to buy it, so he did not want to take it for free. Fu Bo had no choice but to buy it, seeing that he couldn't persuade him. In the end, on the way home, Gu Jinglian held the bubble gun and could not put it down. He played with it all the way home, and when he got home, he could not spit out any bubbles. He was smart and knew how the bubbles worked, so he went to mix some detergent and played with it happily. When Chu Ho heard this, she convulsed with laughter. She did not expect Gu Jinglian to be so adorable when he was young. Only then did she realize who Xiao Bao had inherited his silly cuteness from. At first, no matter how she looked at Xiao Bao, she was suspicious. Whose genes did this guy inherit? She was known for her cold personality, yet this fellow was so cheerful. Most importantly, he was also very stupid. Sometimes, he would be moved to tears just by watching cartoons. Now she knew that Xiao Bao was indeed Gu Jinglian's biological son. Chu Ho walked up to him and squinted at him. Tell me, why were you so cute when you were young? At the same time, she felt that it was unbelievable. If Uncle Fu had not mentioned it unintentionally, she would not have imagined that Gu Jinglian was so adorable when he was young. In her impression, Gu Jinglian must have been a bully when he was young. He must have been domineering and unreasonable. Otherwise, he would have been like a little old man with a sullen face and would not play with the other children. She did not expect him to be as childish as the other children. Shut up. Gu Jinglian's face strangely flushed red. He turned around and snorted coldly. This was obviously awkward. He gritted his teeth secretly. This Uncle Fu was using his past to talk about things again. His mouth was not reliable at all. Chapter 3505. Chu Ho walked in front of him again. Don't be shy. Who doesn't have a childhood? Look, didn't you like those things when you were young? It's Xiao Bao's birthday today, so just let him be. Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly, do as you wish. After saying that, he left with an ashen face. In the morning, many parents sent their children over. At first, many parents were worried. After all, Xiao Bao's parents were not to be trifled with. If their children were to be naughty in front of them and offend them, they might follow in Li Xianlai's footsteps. However, they were on tenterhooks the entire journey. When the car stopped at the entrance of the Gu residence and they got out of the car, they saw a figure in a costume standing at the entrance to welcome the guests. When the children saw it, their eyes lit up. Oh my God! It's Big White. Big White from Superpower Marine Corps. The children all surrounded him, as if they wanted to pounce on him. The parents were also stunned. Who would have thought that the birthday party at the Gu residence would be so different from what they had imagined? This time, they were relieved. However, this birthday party was too different. The birthday party that they had imagined was probably what they had imagined, with the entire hotel booked. When they first heard that it was being held at the Gu residence, they were still wondering how big the Gu residence was and if it could accommodate a class of children. When they reached the entrance, all the parents who came to send their children were stunned. Wasn't this 2F** king big? It was just like the mansions of the wealthy in ancient times. Just walking through the entrance and seeing the winding corridors, as well as the huge garden and courtyard, they were scared out of their wits. They sucked in a deep breath and only let it out when they left the Gu residence. It was 2F** king big. Many parents got lost in the winding corridors. He was indeed rich and overbearing. This piece of land was one of the most expensive in the entire capital. It could be said that every inch of land was worth an inch of gold. Rumor had it that if this land was taken over by the government, it would definitely cost at least 300,000 yuan per square foot. According to their estimation, the entire Gu residence could no longer be measured in square feet. It was more appropriate to use the unit mu to measure it. Comparing oneself to others is really infuriating. Many parents sighed with emotion. They had been working hard since they were very young. After working hard, they finally managed to buy a condominium that was 100 square meters. In the capital, this was considered a standard for the wealthy. Many of them relied on their ancestors' real estate. The main government had demolished 2 houses. Otherwise, with the current housing prices, which were easily tens of thousands of yuan per square meter, and the central area was hundreds of thousands of yuan. How could they afford it? Who would have thought that other people's houses were measured in acres? If the Gu residence was demolished, several buildings could be built. What was even more frightening was that the ownership of the land was in the hands of the Gu family. The government didn't dare to touch it at all. In other words, even if the Gu family were to fall into ruin one day, they could still rely on the mansion to support several generations of people. There was no doubt about this. Many parents had come and worried, but when they saw their children being brought in by people in cartoon costumes, they left with peace of mind. Xiao Bao had been waiting at the door until a Mercedes-Benz slowly drove over and stopped. A young woman opened the car door and carried Xianxia out. Xianxia. When Xiao Bao saw Xianxia, he happily ran to her and held her hand. He said shyly, "Why are you only here now? I've been waiting for you for a long time." Chapter 35:06. I'm sorry, birthday boy. There was a traffic jam on the way, so I'm late. It's okay. Xiao Bao said a little embarrassedly. Xianxia immediately took out an exquisitely wrapped present from behind her back and shyly handed it to him, saying, "Xiao Bao, happy birthday." "Oh, thank you, here. This is a present for you." I don't know if you'll like it." Xiangxia's voice became softer and softer, obviously very shy. However, Xiao Bao seemed very excited and said expectantly, "Can I open it now?" Xianxia said, "You can open it if you want, but if you don't like it, don't be angry, why would I? As long as it's a present from Xianxia, I'll like it." "Okay." Xiao Bao opened the present curiously and saw a bouquet of flowers lying quietly in the gift box. However, this bouquet of flowers was different from ordinary bouquets. This bouquet of flowers was tied up with many starry sky lollipops. Xianxia didn't know what present to give, but thinking that Xiao Bao liked to eat sweets, she tied all her favorite starry sky lollipops into a bouquet and made it into a bouquet of flowers. Wow! The beautiful starry sky lollipops instantly lit up his eyes. He suddenly leaned close to Xianxia and kissed her on the cheek, saying happily, "Thank you, Xianxia. I like it a lot." Xiangxia's face suddenly became as hot as a burning cloud. So much so that she stuttered, You like it, as long as you like it. These sweets. I can't bear to let my dad eat them. But because you're my best friend, so. Xiangxia's mother squatted down and said to Xiao Bao, "I'll leave Xianxia in your care today." "Okay. Xianxia, have fun today. Mommy will come to pick you up later." "Okay." The two little guys watched as the car left. Xiao Bao immediately held her hand and said with a smile, "Xianxia, come in quickly." Xianxia was led through the door by Xiao Bao. As soon as she stepped through the door, she was shocked to see the yard full of cartoon characters. She was so shocked that her eyes widened. Wow! Other than gasping in amazement, Xianxia was so excited that she couldn't say a single word. Xianxia also liked to watch cartoons. She had watched many Disney animated movies many times. Her favorite movies were Frozen, and she also liked Dubai from Superland Marines. As such, tears welled up in her eyes as soon as she saw Dubai. In the hearts of young children, the characters in these animated films were not just limited to the adult world. The word cute was enough to describe them. To them, these people were the hottest superstars, and even more so, their dreams. Most of the children in the class had arrived and were playing with the cartoon dolls in the yard. It was as if he was in a fairy tale world. Xianxia even suspected that she was dreaming. Xiao Bao asked, "Jean, you also like Dubai, right?" "Yes. I like Big White the most." Xiao Bao immediately said, "Dubai. Come here." Hearing his little masters summon, Dubai immediately rushed over and waved his hand as he stood in front of them with his big belly. Xiao Bao introduced, "This is Princess Xianxia." Xianxia stared at Dubai nervously. Chapter 35:07. Xianxia blushed shyly. "Hello, Dubai." Pausing for a moment, she suddenly smiled brightly and placed her hands behind her back shyly. "Dubai, can I hug you?" she asked nervously. Dubai tilted his head, looking very adorable on the surface. However, the scar-faced man in the costume had a gloomy expression on his face. He was the worst at dealing with children. Even so, Xiao Bao glared at him fiercely from the side, as if he would not hold back if he dared to refuse. Dabai immediately opened his arms and said gently, "Of course." Xianxia blushed even harder, but she happily pounced toward Dabai. Upstairs, Gu Jinglian looked at the yard full of dolls and little ghosts with a gloomy expression. Originally, having such a stupid and idiotic son like Xiao Bao was already enough to give him a headache. Now, he had to deal with a bunch of brats. Especially in Xiao Bao's class, there were a few mischievous children who were fooling around in the yard. They climbed up the rockery nimbly, and below them was the pond. Uncle Fu stood at the foot of the rockery anxiously and tried to coax them to come down. They won't come down. They won't come down. Wow! There are so many fish in the pond. The fish are so cute. I really want to touch them. A group of children lay by the pond and looked around. Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows gloomily. The children's chattering filled his ears, and it was as if thousands of mosquitoes were flying around his ears. That was why he hated little brats the most. They were especially annoying. Speaking of Gu Jinglian, he was not a fan of brats. At first, he did not have much patience with Xiao Bao. However, after spending some time together and getting used to this guy, he sometimes found him very cute. Although he was really annoyed when he was annoyed. However, he was still his son. However, he might not have half the patience to deal with other children. Gu Jinglian closed the window and returned to his study. After a while, Uncle Fu came upstairs and knocked on the door. "Master, the cake is about to be cut. I don't have to show up," Gu Jinglian said impatiently. He felt extremely troubled at the thought of going downstairs to cut the cake and having to face dozens of little idiots. That's not very good, is it? After all, you are Xiao Bao's father. If you are not present on Xiao Bao's birthday, it will inevitably make the little guy unhappy. Gu Jinglian, he rubbed his brows tiredly and stood up abruptly. 10 minutes later, Gu Jinglian appeared downstairs and happened to bump into Chu He pushing the three-tiered cake pagoda into the dining room. The cafeteria was very big. There were 10 tables in the cafeteria. 4 children sat at one table while Little Treasure and Xianxia sat at another table. The table was filled with sumptuous dishes, fruits, desserts, and all kinds of delicacies. However, the children did not care about it at all. They were looking forward to the cake, so the delicacies in front of them did not attract their attention at all. Everyone looked around, looking forward to it. It was not until Chu Ho slowly pushed the cake tower into the dining room that the delicate-looking cake fell into the children's line of sight, causing a huge commotion. No one had ever seen such a beautiful and exquisite cake. Chapter 3508. This was specially made by Uncle Fu. He realized that Xiao Bao especially liked to buy. Hence, he sent his subordinates to ask around and found the best cake shop in Beijing. He reserved this cake half a month in advance. The cake tower had 3 levels, and each level was filled with chocolate. On the top level, the pie was made with icing and looked extremely adorable. It was a 100% replica of the cartoon image in the movie. Wow! What a beautiful cake! Many of the children widened their eyes in envy. When Chu Ho pushed the cake to the center, many of the children were already drooling. Gu Jinglian had just stepped into the restaurant when he heard a sea of cheers. Dabai! What a beautiful cake! Ah, I want that Dabai! Gu Jinglian's head was about to explode from the noise. Chu Ho immediately said, "Xiao Bao, why aren't you coming up? It's almost time to share the cake." Xiao Bao had just walked over and started looking for a knife and fork. Uncle Fu immediately stopped him and said, "Xiao Bao, you haven't sung the birthday song yet." "Oh, right. The birthday song." Xianxia stood up and turned around. "Let's sing the birthday song for Xiao Bao." "Okay." The children who were eager to eat the cake were surprisingly cooperative. They clapped their little hands and the sound of clapping could be heard. "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to Xiao Bao. Happy birthday to you." Clap, clap, clap. The sound of hands clapping. 30 or so immature voices of children sounded out. They were tone deaf, and they were like demonic voices that could destroy everything in their path. Gu Jinglian was almost possessed by the voices, but Xiao Bao was overjoyed. Chu Ho placed the crown on his head and urged, "Xiao Bao, make a wish." "Okay." Xiao Bao immediately clasped his hands together, closed his eyes, and began to make a wish. Immediately after, he made his wish and blew out the candles. "Happy birthday to Xiao Bao. Let's eat cake. Let's eat cake." The children swarmed forward like a tide. Uncle Fu immediately rushed over to maintain order. "Don't fight. Let our little birthday girl cut the cake." Xiao Bao looked up at Gu Jinglian and said nervously, "Dad, the cake is so tall. How do we cut it?" The cake was more than a meter tall, but he was not even as tall as the cake. Even if he stood on his tiptoes, he could not cut it. Gu Jinglian looked at him with disdain, but immediately bent down and hugged him in his arms. Chu Ho held his little hand, and together, the mother and son cut the cake. When it was time to divide the cake, the group of little fellows started to squabble. "I want big white. Dabai is mine. 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 Mine." Shang-er tugged at Xiao Bao's sleeve and said pitifully, "Xiao Bao, I really like big white. Can you give big white to me?" "Of course." Xiao Bao said to everyone, "Can you give big white to Shang-er?" A boy stood up and said indignantly, "Why should Shang-er be the only one?" "Xiao Bao, you're biased." "I want it too." Shang-er pouted. Seeing this, Xiao Bao put on a protective stance. "Give it to Shang-er. Give it to me. Big white is Shang-er's. Big white is mine." Gu Jinglian could not take it anymore and directly cut big white in half. Clean and straightforward. Half each. Xiao Bao, Shang-er. Chapter 3509. The scene suddenly quieted down, not a single sound could be heard. All the kids were stunned as they stared blankly at the center of the cake. Dabai was originally extremely adorable, but now, it was pitifully sliced in half and poured onto the cake. Looking at this tragic murder scene, everyone was shocked. Dabai. It was unknown which brat let out a ghostly wail and howl, but the group of children trembled in fear. Dabai was cut in half. Dabai is dead. Shang-er's eyes reddened. She blinked and choked. "Dabai, Chu Ho, this." She turned around and glared at Gu Jinglian. "What are you doing?" "Dividing the cake." "Who told you to cut Dabai in half?" "Gu Jinglian, how else should I cut it?" "Cut off the head?" Chu Ho was speechless. "You're just dividing the cake. Do you have to be so bloody?" Gu Jinglian was even more speechless. "It's just a cake. Why do you have to be so bloody?" Seeing the children huddle together and yell, Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho started arguing again. Uncle Fu immediately put on disposable gloves and began to remedy the situation. He lifted the two halves of Dabai and smeared some cream in the middle. However, the two halves were barely glued together. He broke out in cold sweat. Okay. Since Xiao Bao is our birthday boy today, let's give Dabai to him, okay?" The group of children regained some energy. Uncle Fu placed the repaired Dabai on Xiao Bao's plate. Xiao Bao held the plate in his hand and walked to Shang-er. He said shyly, "Shang-er, you like Dabai the most. I'll give you Dabai, okay?" Shang-er nodded with red eyes and immediately smiled through her tears. Uncle Fu began to divide the cake. The children held the cake in their hands and realized that the cake's filling was rainbow-colored. What a beautiful cake. I can't bear to eat it. The next time I celebrate my birthday, I'll ask my mother to buy me a cake like this too. But it should be very expensive, right? The group of children chattered as they munched on the cake. Xiao Bao was eating happily with Shang-er when a few children sneaked up behind him and shouted, "Xiao Bao." Xiao Bao had just turned around when his face was suddenly smeared with cake. "Happy birthday." "Ahahaha. The atmosphere was cheerful and warm. Uncle Fu divided 2 pieces of cake and handed them to Chu Ho and Gu Jinglian. He smiled and said, "Old master, it's time to eat the cake." "I'm not eating. I know you don't like to eat cake, but today is Xiao Bao's birthday. This cake must be eaten." Only then did Gu Jinglian take it. When Xiao Bao saw Gu Jinglian, he couldn't help but want to tease him. He smeared the cake on both his hands and sneaked behind Gu Jinglian. He giggled and said, "Daddy." Gu Jinglian had just turned his head when he saw Xiao Bao reaching out his 2 little paws that were smeared with cream and waving at him. Almost instinctively, Gu Jinglian slapped the cake in his hand onto Xiao Bao's face. The tray gradually slid down. Xiao Bao stood there in a daze. His face was smeared with cake and was unrecognizable. Chu Ho, Uncle Fu, the children immediately roared with laughter. "Ha ha ha." Xiao Bao howled, "Daddy is a big baddie."